other channel that I created. Because apparently it does, let's see, stream health. Green. Okay. So it seems to be working. How satisfied am I with my YouTube experience? Oh, I forgot to change over the chat room, but that's okay. Who cares? We're going to be talking about education.
Education?
Yeah, since you work in the bank, I don't know if you have any actual experience in this. Banks giving out education loans?
Yeah, and loans. Yeah, I can talk to that. It's actually the next bubble that's probably coming.
I'm surprised it hasn't burst yet. The way that it's been, like the trend that it's been going at, I don't see how it's not reaching a fever pitch yet.
Well, the Fed's, yeah. A sec.
So, okay. So what I know is the federal aid, right? The FAFSA or whatever the fuck it's called.
Yeah.
Federal financial aid for whatever students. I don't even know what the fucking acronym stands for. I completely forgot. Basically, you apply, and so long as you have moderately accurate information that you put in there, you are approved. And then that program will pay that money directly to the school, so you don't see that money. And then once you finish school, whether you drop out or you graduate, 6 months after, you start getting collection notices from the federal government to pay back those loans. And that's when the majority of people realize how much money they actually took out in loans. Apparently, you can go through your entire 4 or 6 or 8 years of college without ever even realizing how much money you're actually spending on your education. Which blows my mind when you think about it. But anyways, you get that news 6 months after you're done with school. Now, they say, because for some reason the program is set up that when you go to college, 6 months after you start your education, or finish your education, you should be getting a job and be well on your way of being financially stable, high-earning adult. Which is quite funny to me. I mean, was that program established in like the 50s? Because it sounds like that might have been something that happened in like the 50s and 60s, but it's definitely not been happening the last 20 years, right? Like doctors will go $250,000 or more into student loan debt, and they'll be making in the ballpark like their first couple years of like $40,000 a year, right?
Sure.
And so they got massive student loan debt to pay back, but eventually they'll get to pay that back. Now, there are people who get doctorates in things like gender studies and Afro studies and art, art history. I've even seen there's a doctorates available if you are going to school for things like what do they call it, pre-kinder care or something like that. I'm like, well, it's just a ridiculous thing for there to even be a doctorate available in, just like the other things that I have just mentioned. And I forgot what it's called, but it's religious studies. There's a different name that they use. It's not called religious studies, and they get doctorates, and those are all 6 figures.
Like theology.
Yeah, theology. That's it. Yeah, theology major. So those are all 6-figure debt things, right? Like if you're going for a doctorate, you're going 6 figures into debt, like guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
All of those jobs that I just listed, or all of those doctors that I just listed, do not have earnings on the other side. Whether it's 6 months or 6 years, there's no earning in that field that's going to pay that debt back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so basically what the whole discussion of this stream is to be centered on is the failing of higher education. We'll address the public school education, all those other things later, but I want more data set aside for that, and that to be its own stream. And I assume I'm going to be the one who has to provide the majority of the information on that, because if my public life is any indication, people have no idea how the public school systems actually work in this country. So I'm going to focus on college education, and the failings of education, and two, the financial, I don't even know what you call it. It's a scam, right? It's not a Ponzi scheme. I don't know what the name of the scam is, but basically they are taking the government is taking taxpayer money now to give it to everybody who's going to school, regardless of what their possible income is on the other side. So they're taking taxpayer money, giving it to public and private schools, and then charging you for it later. All right, so the schools, the tuition keeps going up and up and up and up and up, and it's going up at a much faster rate than inflation accounts for. And there are schools that are charging like astronomically high tuition rates, and they're saying it's for amenities that they have. But I remember UCLA and another one that was there, maybe Long Beach, University of California, Long Beach. Were both in hot water like maybe 6 years back because the students were protesting the raise in their tuition costs, and turned out that one of the things that the colleges were doing were giving like $1 million houses to professors that didn't even have tenure. Like these were sign-on things, and they got a car that was paid for by the school, and they had six-figure incomes, and all these other perks and benefits that were coming out to millions of dollars a year that these professors were getting, while they were saying we're raising the tuition cost because of all these amenities that the students demand that we provide. And it turns out the majority of the money was going to all these perks for mediocre professors that half the students thought were shit professors and didn't want to take their classes anyway. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, no, I mean that's all fairly accurate. As far as the university funding goes, I can speak to that. And then there's also the loans. The FAFSA is the federal aid, right? So that's going to encompass somebody who you have to qualify for that as well. You have to be under a particular income level.
No, you don't.
For FAFSA?
Yeah, I used it when I was making $80,000 a year, and I used it when I was making nothing. As I said, if you have moderately accurate information that you put in there, they give you the money.
That must have changed recently or something, because when I went, because what they look at, I think they look at not only your income, but the income of your immediate family. So,
it's parents, right?
Right.
Now, if you're old enough, you don't put your parental information in there.
Well, if you're not claimed as a dependent, as far as I know, you can do that.
Yeah.
So basically,
yeah.
You're not. If in the prior tax year your parents didn't claim you as a dependent, if you're self-sufficient, then you can apply. But the federal student aid, I'm pretty sure that they give that out when you fall below a particular. Like I'm on the website right now. I'm trying to find where it is, but so like they do.
That might be what it says, but they gave it to me.
Well, because there's, I mean, was it a loan or was it just like a grant? Was it just free money?
No, it's the loan, the federal aid loan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the federal loans, which are done, I mean, those are done through a number of financial institutions. Those are all federally backed loans that come with extremely low interest rates because obviously they're backed by the federal government. Those types of loans that anybody can really apply for and get those loans. The requirements are extremely lenient.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. That the money you have to pay back, the free money doesn't matter, right? Like, get all the free money that you can if you're going to college. It doesn't matter what you're going for, but it's my chief concern is people who are going to jobs that have no educations that have no future, and they're getting those loans. And anybody can get those. Like, if you failed out of high school, if the college will accept you, which is one of the big issues I want to talk about, if the college accepts you, you get the loan, right? So even though you completely bombed out of school, that isn't a determining factor of whether or not you go to college. If the college says yeah, which there are community college and stuff like that. There are private colleges who literally don't. They'll give you like a test to take when you come in, and it's like a 2-page test with like 20 questions.
Yeah, if you're talking about like a standard like 2 to 4 year college,
Yeah.
right? When you're going in there, if you go to apply for a student loan, Most of the time, I know that the federal loans work this way, as well as like the private loans for student loans. They don't require, and these are even the most conservative banks that you're going to find out there. They don't require you to produce anything showing your academic achievement. So basically, as
Well,
long as
that's because the government got rid of that. 'Cause it used to be college admissions and the private loan sector. They used was it SAT scores and IQ scores because there actually used to be like a mandatory IQ test that was taken in school. So like when you were graduating, so you'd take your SATs, your ASVAB, and an IQ test, and they would actually use that to determine whether or not they would give you a loan. And they decided that that's somehow racist. Your academic performance equals racism, and they got rid of it. And so you actually can't
that doesn't surprise me at all because it's kind of a sliding scale up in a weird way. So like they'll require most major banks will require you to provide proof of your academic progress as well as your academic results in an institution if you're applying for like a specific type of degree. So if it's like a 2-year pilot degree, or like if you're going in for medical loans, or medical degree loans, stuff like that, most institutions will have a separate product for that, and under those products you have to prove what your academic progress is there, because you can rack up
that's progress. That's continuing to use it, right? Not getting it in the first place, right? Like continuing education beyond the
well, no, because there's like actual nursing schools and stuff like that.
Oh, technical schools?
Not even just generally like technical schools, but like if you were to go to a nursing school at a major university, when you go and apply at a university, you can get general admission to go and do your associates or whatever, your first 2 years. But like if you're going into a major university where they've got like a nursing program or something like that, typically either in the first 2 years or in the second 2 years, you have to actually apply for the school. And that's when you actually have to go through and get loans that are specifically tailored to these particular professions, because they cost a lot more money. And most banks will kind of levy that risk by making sure that you're actually achieving the grades. Because if you drop out, because these schools are extremely competitive, you're still on the line for the loan, but it's much more likely that you're going to have anywhere in the ballpark of $50,000 to $100,000 worth of debt and nothing to show for it.
Right.
So that's only with these specific schools. If you're talking
you're talking about continuing education, right?
I'm just talking about general bachelor's.
No, I'm talking about the actual not the application for the program and for the loan, but to continue, because they don't give you all the money at once and then say, okay, see you in 2 years. They do it in semesters.
Well, it's typically done how, I mean, I can speak to the bank. I don't know about Sallie Mae or any of the other federal loans. Like I know Navient is another one.
Yeah, they do it by semester.
They'll do it, semester or year. You can apply for both, but they basically do a check-in. So because they check your aggregate debt every single time as you progress through the 4 years.
Right.
And depending on how you're doing, if you've had any issues, like sometimes they'll ask you for we'll ask for like proof of not just enrollment, but just basically just a progress report to make sure that the credits are actually being completed and that somebody's not just re-enrolling for the same credits over again in a semester,
right? Because
they failed all their classes. So sometimes that'll happen, but typically in a regular, like most people, it's like your general person who's going to go in for some stupid easy degree like communications or something like that, right? Something that really anybody can get because it's just a bunch of bullshit. There's not, because the typical amount or the cost of an education is pretty well mapped out now. So the bank will call the school and say, okay, how much money does a person feasibly need over a 4-year period to get this kind of degree, right? What's your graduation rate, right? And that's how the bank will tailor the risk to that particular product.
Right.
And it's really low because most people don't flunk out of that degree. The problem is that when they get out of school, they don't have a job and they can't repay it.
Of course.
Right? And you can't include a student loan in a bankruptcy. So they just carry that debt with them. Like you can't default on a student loan. The only way that some people will find ways to do it. Like what they'll do is they'll take out personal loans, right, at a higher percentage rate, and then they'll use the personal loans to pay off the student loans, and then they'll just default on the personal loans.
Right.
Right. So they just wind up going into bankruptcy a different way. So it's not a, I mean, you'd probably get nailed in bankruptcy court over something like that. But if you're some dumb kid that's like 23-year-old, some 23-year-old kid who just amassed a shit ton of student loan debt, most judges aren't going to fucking destroy your life over that. They'll probably pass you with a Chapter 7 bankruptcy and just let you move. So that all comes back to the taxpayer, eventually.
Well, yeah. And so, with the fucking financial aid thing, the FAFSA, they you put your information in there. It's like your income information, and then I think you put the school code in there. You can put more than one school code in there for some reason. I guess like if you're applying to college, like your first time, so you're applying to a bunch of different colleges, you'd put them all in there, and then whatever one you get accepted to, it'll already be in the system to get paid or something like that. Not exactly sure why, but you can put like I think 10 in there at a time or something. And so you do that and you send it off, and so long as nothing is like weirdly abnormal about your application, they approve you.
The credit requirements are extremely low because, obviously a student isn't going to have any credit history. Some 18-year-old kid, like, what are they going to have? They might have, like, a Macy's card or something like that.
Well, no, I'm saying, like, even if you're a higher earner, you're a low earner, it doesn't matter. And the issue that I have with the whole system is this. Those 18-year-olds who are, 17, 18-year-olds who are graduating high school and applying to colleges, the one thing that nobody's telling them to do is see how much that college costs. To look at what they're going to college for. Like, here's the thing, right? If I told you that you're going to go $100,000 into debt, shouldn't you know why you're going into that $100,000 of debt before you take that on? Right?
Well, sure.
College students do not. They know they're going to college, but they don't know what they're going to college for. They don't know what the job prospects are. How many times, I fucking forgot the statistic, but it's something like almost half or a little over half of sophomores switch their major. Right? They end up going for something completely different. The majority of freshmen, like the overwhelming majority of freshmen, are undecided with a major at all. So they go an entire year, which could be $30,000 to $60,000 in debt, and they don't even know what they're doing there, right? And nobody's explaining to any of them that this all costs you money. It costs you money. You are paying for this. It doesn't seem like you're paying for it, but you are paying for it, and you're gonna get fucked in the end. Right. This is why you have all the millennials out there throwing their hissy fits in the streets about how they have the student loan debt and everyone else should pay for it. So here's the thing.
Right.
They took on all that debt without ever looking into the financial burden they were taking on and whether or not it was worth it for them to do that in the first place. They just went and they just did it, and now they're demanding that everybody else foot the bill for their bad decisions. And that's literally what the whole situation boils down to. And so you have 17 and 18-year-olds, and they go to guidance counselors and obviously their parents. A lot of them have parents that went to college, right? But you get a lot of liberal parents who are telling their kids, like, oh, go to college and find yourself, or like, oh, well, you don't have to decide what you want. It's like, well, here's the thing though, when you give your children advice like that because you're trying to be the cool parent, you're setting them up for failure. Because what if they pick something like a humanities degree, like the gender studies major, right? What are they going to do when they get out on the other side? Protest in the streets and show everybody their tits? Like,
pretty much.
They really need $100,000 in debt to do that? Because they can do that for fucking free right now.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, that's a big point of discussion, right? Like that bubble is looming now, and what's happening. I don't know if this is Trump's administration. I followed a little bit of when the secretary was selected and what they were doing with student loans. I'd have to go back through and look at it again, but basically, what the federal government is now doing is they're opening up banks to be able to start going through and refinancing and consolidating student loan debt under private student loans. So whereas, and what this is meant to do, right? Even though you got maybe a lower rate with your federal loan, right?
Yeah.
If you go through and refinance it with a bank and consolidate it maybe with other hard debts or other things that you got, or maybe you take out other loans to consolidate those debts alongside with your student loans. You're not going to get a lower rate, most likely. But what you can do is get your payment down, right? So they'll have these huge ass long loans that go on for years and years and years. After this is after all the deferment. This is after the 6 months. This is after the people are already paying back. They'll stretch that out over a much longer time so that the remaining payment that they have to pay is lower. But the banks are going to be retaining higher interest rates, so they're going to still make more money out of it. So that's basically the way that I guess the federal government is now trying to deal with this problem. I don't know how well that's going to work because it really just depends on what happens with millennials now that they're getting out of university, because I think we're in the last 2 graduation periods for this.
I think it's only one. I think next year is the last one.
Yeah. Well, that's when
failures, but we don't count them as people. So.
Yeah. Well,
the ones who didn't finish college because they failed out and had to repeat like half their classes, we don't count them.
Yeah. So I mean, that's sort of the thing is that it depends on how well those kids do, and I mean, I don't know if you've taken a look out the window recently, but a lot of people just don't want to look for work. Like they go through these 4-year programs and they come out of the end of it with a degree, a piece of paper, and they think they're some learned individual, right? And they don't want to take jobs like the rest of most normal people do, where they start out at the bottom and work their way up and are making small amounts of money. They don't want to do that. They want the cushy office job, right? And I think this is what's contributing anyway to how many kids are just living at home with their parents now.
The big thing that I see as a problem is they're not fixing for the next generation, really. Right? Because they're like, oh, all of you who are out of college are complaining about all the student loan debt, so here's a Band-Aid for that problem. It's like, yeah, but that problem is still going to be created for millions of kids every year. Right? Millions of kids are graduating high school and taking on that same exact problem and are none the wiser that they're going to be in that same exact situation 4 years from now. So you're not fixing it. It's like there's a flood and then you're like, well, we're going to channel the water where the flood water goes over here so that your village isn't getting as flooded. It's like, but the village is still underwater.
Yeah. Well, I think probably what should happen, I highly doubt this will happen. But what I would like to see happen is the federal government remove any sort of subsidies that they're giving to universities for these degree programs in the I use this term loosely, fine arts, so that
humanities. It's the
humanity. Yeah, because those degrees, well, I'm not going to sit here and discredit them.
I will.
I think that there's
all the way to anthropology. I don't get. If you're going to school to be an anthropologist, you should know you're going to be fucking broke. All right.
Yeah. Well,
under humanities, it's a stupid degree. All right.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a need for education, psychology, things along those lines. But, I definitely think that those types of degrees, because they don't net high income for decades after people attain those degrees, that we shouldn't be subsidizing them through the U.S. government. I think that the universities, if they choose to run those programs at all, should be funded by probably your more wealthy families that are going to actually pay to keep those programs afloat.
Well, yeah, all the extracurricular activities, I don't think they should be college funded. I don't know if you are aware of how much money, what is it, the NCAA, how much that actually makes for colleges that have a football team, right? Or March Madness. You know, March Madness. Any school that's in March Madness is looking at getting almost $500 million for that 1 month. Right?
Jeez.
Hundreds of millions of dollars to every school that's in there for that, and it's 1 month. It's March, right? It's in the name. 1 month. And football is netting hundreds of millions of dollars to schools every year. And the better that those schools do in that, the more money they're going to end up making, right? Like there's a whole sports watching apparatus that's around it. And here's the most fucked up part is they're like, we're giving you a scholarship. It's like, yeah, but your education is shit. So the scholarship that you're giving them is worth shit. And then you're also making hundreds of millions of dollars off them while giving them, you know, $46,000 a year in a scholarship for a fucking degree that you don't even care if they perform because you're just using them to make money, right? Like half of them graduate with their I can't remember. There's a book that was written about it. It's something about like there's a huge chunk of the college athletes who are just being passed through their classes so that they can maintain their grade point average so they can continue to play because they're making the college's money, which means when they graduate, they don't know shit. It's like they have a degree and they don't know a goddamn thing. So if they don't get into the NFL, they're going to like end up fucking filling up a car at a gas pump as like their entire fucking life job right there. Right? It's doing literally nothing. You're like, oh, they didn't have any debt. It's like, yeah, but they spent 4 years getting their body beat up to get a degree, and they're not going to be able to hold down a job because they didn't even barely knew how to fucking read the whole time they were in college, and you were just giving them A's so they could keep playing. And they didn't make it to the professional league, so that, you know, it doesn't do them any good. It's a complete waste of their time. They could have been better off just going straight into the workforce.
Straight into the workforce, or potentially going into maybe a less illustrious program, something like in the trades. We've got.
Oh yeah. They could like underwater welding. I've heard people use it as a mockery. It's like that's a kind of a cool job, right? So like these big ass, you know, deep sea barges, and like the Navy has them too. But obviously you can't be you can be a civilian doing that if you don't have any criminal background. You can get like a contractor job for like the U.S. Navy doing it on naval ships. But you're talking, it's like, okay, it's not a glamorous job, but it's a very well-paying job. It's a skilled job, and that work is not going anywhere, right? The barges that are bringing shit over from China and you know, all of the southeast French Indochina region, all those barges that are coming over, they're not going to be replaced by airplanes anytime soon. There's too much cargo, and it makes the cost of shipping so cheap that mode of transportation is not going anywhere, which means as long as there's a demand for those ships, there's a demand for an underwater welder. And pretty much any I've seen 14-year-old inbred hillbillies who know how to weld. All you got to do is learn how to, you know, scuba dive on top of that, and you got a 6-figure job.
Well, yeah, and that's the case for a lot of jobs out there. If you go look at the jobs report, what you're going to find is that we've got plenty of work out there, plenty of jobs that just nobody qualifies for, because nobody's taking the training to get those particular types of jobs, because everybody wants the nice cushy desk job or office job.
Did you notice that the college educated, like people with actual college degrees, their lowest bracket of earners are actually below the top earners with no college education, college education, and they are earning more money than college graduates. Not all college graduates, right? But that's what I'm saying is, if you can go to college, spend 4 years, go 6 figures into debt for something that's going to net you less money than some asshole who started a job right out of high school and never stepped 1 foot on a college campus at all, never even did orientation, never applied anywhere, and he could be making six figures while you're struggling to make 50,000. And
Yep.
It's the choices that you make. And here's the problem: is the college, like a private college, like the University of California system, pretty much any degree path that you pick costs the same. So if you're going into pre-law or pre-med, or you're going into gender studies with a major in menstrual blood art, you're paying exactly the same, right? Those are going to cost exactly the same. The problem is, one of those three has no earning potential on the other side, right? The pre-med, okay, now you got to go, and the pre-law, you got to go to med school and go to law school, and you're racking up even more debt. It's like, yeah, but after 5 years, if they don't completely fuck themselves up by, like, you know, giving illegal scripts to people if they're a doctor, or they don't go and commit a felony if they're a lawyer or a doctor, right? Like if they don't go and do something that fucks their life up, they're going to be able to pay that debt back, and they're going to make 6-7 figures a year, right?
Yep.
Within 5 years. If you majored in menstrual blood artwork, you're never going to make money. Like that's not a field that there's money in, right? That's just not going to happen. You're going to have to go pick a job in something completely different than the menstrual art blood.
Right. Well, that's the thing is that universities used to be specifically for specialization, right? So you would only go to a university if you know, you were looking for a specialization in something that you couldn't just simply start doing. So like this is true still today. A lot of people will go and get degrees in finance or economics or what have you, right? But
Business management.
business management's probably a better example.
It is a worthless degree, but required. And when I say it's a worthless degree, it's because that's literally what I'm doing my college education on, what I'm using my GI Bill for. And I have literally gotten A's in my classes. I've never even gotten a single book that was required for the class. Right? Like I don't read the coursework. I have never gotten the books that are required for the course. It's like, this is shit that through like actual real world experience that I've learned. It's like there's some terminology that like, oh, I didn't know that, and then when I read the definition, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. I just didn't know that's what it was called. And that's about the extent of what that degree has gotten me so far. And I'm like 1 year away from finishing.
Right. It's the thing
it's a
that
joke. It's a joke.
Well, I mean, you can, and that's the thing is that you can easily go and start working for a company at the bottom, right? You know, I'll speak to banking because that's, well, I mean, I'm in like basically the back room of all that, but you know, there are plenty of people who, when they go work for a bank, they'll start out as like a teller. They might make a move into like a lead teller position, and then from there maybe into like a personal banker, and then from personal banker they can go pretty much do anything in the company, right? And if you're diligent, if you show up to work on time, you know, you're not starting a whole bunch of shit in the office, it's very likely that you could easily do that within 2 to 3 years time. And then from there, you know, once you're in the actual operations of a bank, you could be easily making $100,000 a year. I mean, anywhere between $60,000 to $100,000 a year just doing operations level work that's very specialized, which you'll be trained into at the, you know, on the job.
Right.
You don't necessarily need a degree to go and do any of that. You just need to have a work ethic.
Well, so there's a reason I'm going for the degree. Exceptions to every rule. I think banking is actually more of the exception than it is the rule. Because a lot of the fields that I've looked at where I was like, oh, I would be interested in doing management there's full on like a degree requirement. Like if you don't have a degree, do not apply.
Right.
And it's the same. And it's there are some places where they're internal, like the government agencies and government contractors and companies that work on that. They'll have job posting boards that are for, you know, veterans, service members, government contractors, and blah 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 blah. Some of them are only promote from within, and they still require a degree. So like, whereas the bank, you can work your way up by proving yourself. even in government contractor jobs where I can see where it's internal only to that company, they're requiring a degree from their own employees. So basically, you start as an entry-level person. You have to go to college and get a degree while getting that experience just to be considered for the job, for the promotion. And as I said, like the degree is very pointless. Everything that the school will teach you, especially if you're working in a place and you are a hard worker, right? Like and like the bank would be a good example. If you're learning the ins and outs of what goes on there, the things that they're going to teach you in school are going to be completely worthless to you. You are literally paying for an embossed piece of paper. So the best thing you could do is find the cheapest possible college you can and pay whatever student loans that you have to get, because a lot of them they go really slow if you don't apply for the federal aid, because that's their moneymaker. Like the problem is I moved colleges to go for a cheaper college because I'm draining too much of my VA, and if you don't apply for the federal aid, you have to pay all of your tuition costs for the semester before the class starts, or you can't enroll. Right? So even though I'm going to be getting the money, it's in the general chat, the wordy place.
Okay.
So even if even though I'm getting the GI Bill that's going to give me the money, and then I pay the tuition, because the school has to report my grades to the VA so that I keep getting my money, right? So I'm like, it's kind of fucked up that I now have to rely on you to get reimbursed for the money that I'm giving you, right? I have to rely on you, but you already got your money, and that's not a trust system, right? So if I don't pay you when I get my GI Bill, you can cut me off from classes, right? If I don't get my GI Bill, you don't get paid because you didn't report it to the school. Like, there's a whole a system that's built in that other colleges use, where this one wants to be paid up front. And I'm like, so if they forget to send the monthly report to the VA, I'm not going to get my money back, and then I'm not going to be in school anymore, right? Like, if they don't report it to the VA, I don't get paid. So then I'll have to like out $1,500 from my pocket that I won't get back because the school fucked up, and who knows how long it'll take for them to fix that. And I definitely won't have the money to start next time around for the next semester. But and I picked it because it is so cheap. I'm taking 4 classes. It's $1,500. They're like 300 and something a class or something like that, if I remember correctly.
Right, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean,
the thing is, I was paying $1,700 for 2 classes at the school I was going to before, so it's a huge difference.
Well, that's the thing is, this is what I've noticed with a lot of people who, it's funny. I'm actually working with a girl now she's got a doctorate, and the doctorate that she has is in a completely different subject. I mean, worlds apart. She shouldn't be in the profession that she is right now,
right.
But she's just starting out, and it doesn't seem like she has any interest in leaving. It's not like this is just like a means to an end sort of thing. She's got this doctorate now. I know she has student loans. I don't know how much, but I notice this in a lot of places that I've worked. People will get these degrees. They'll find out they have no work, right? Then they'll end up going into the job that was actually waiting for them, which they could have either prepared for or just entered.
Right.
And then now they're saddled with debt that's probably going to take them into at least probably even their midlife. I mean, 30s, maybe even 40s, depending on how far they went with their education.
Well, you got to think. I mean, if you went to a higher tier school, right? Like, not just some random local school, not a community college. Right. Like, if you went to like UCLA, a 4-year degree, I think you're coming out at the minimum at like $80,000 if you just did the minimum coursework that was needed. Right? If you took other courses and deviated and fucked off for a while and had to change your major and take more courses, you're already over $100,000 for debt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a 4-year degree at UCLA. That's the University of California. Like, that's not Harvard or Princeton, which is $70,000 a year. So you're definitely going to be 6 figures in debt leaving that place.
Yeah, well, that's sort of my point, though, is that, like, what it seems like to me is that this is more by what they're selling to people. Because you got to think of it this way: like, why do people go and seek these degrees,
Because
right?
they're idiots.
It's probably partially that, but I think that what they're really selling them when they sell them the whole experience of the university experience and everything that goes into it reminds me of like the Starbucks experience. When you go into a Starbucks, you're not buying coffee. What you're purchasing is the little cup that you can carry around and show off to everyone and say, "Hey, look, I'm wealthy enough to purchase things like Starbucks. You see my Starbucks cup?" This is the sort of thing that I think that people get into when they get into universities. I'm pursuing a degree in X, Y, and Z, and
that makes them stupid, because the people who go to Harvard and Princeton are not doing that, right? Like,
oh, I'm sure to a degree.
Well, no. Watch Ben Shapiro, and he humble brags about how he had 30 people come and interview him because they wanted to give him the job. So it's basically, if you're graduating from Harvard, it's the equivalent of companies begging you to come work for them. Right?
Well, that would be the case for...
yeah, I'm going to go, almost $300,000 in debt, but people are offering me $100,000 at 21 years old the first day I'm out of college. It's like, so yeah, that's definitely worth the cost if you can afford the cost in the first place and actually pass and get accepted to the college. Right? But if you're going to UCLA for bragging rights and going $100,000 into debt, you're just an idiot. Because that's not happening to UCLA graduates.
Well, a lot of people do that. They use their degree as though it's some sort of indicator of their self-worth or intelligence, and it does come off a lot like narcissism. You ask them what their job prospects are, you find out that they're working in a similar place that you are, maybe in a lower similar position than you are, and it's like, well, how much debt did you have to go into to acquire that degree that you're not even going to use probably for the rest of your life? Well, and it's all about...
they are idiots. But the big thing is, and this has been the Democrat Party's biggest line when it comes to education, is that everybody deserves to go to college and everyone should go to college. And if you go to college, you'll make more money. Like by the virtue of attending college, magically that's going to equate more money in your pocket.
Right, exactly.
There's no logic behind that statement. It's those are the same people, right? Liberals, Democrats run the colleges, they run the universities. A lot of private colleges, like even private colleges, are very liberal, and they actually give class credits for going out and protesting conservatives. Right? There are entire fields in the humanities and entire specializations in there that have zero conservatives who have worked there for over 30 years. Not a single person is even a conservative in that entire field who is educating, right? Like they run that lock, stock, and barrel.
Well, I find it...
that guy, Brett Weinstein? You remember him?
I was just about to bring that up, actually. Yeah.
That dude is way far left. Like, okay, compared to me, I'm like slightly right of the center of the right wing. Like I'm aware of that. That dude is left of the center of the left wing, right? Like not centrist. He's over there with progressive views that are completely contradictory to my views, and they were calling him an alt-right Nazi. They were saying that he was further right than I am. If that's a perfect example of how far left colleges are.
Well, especially where it is. He's from Evergreen. Is that it?
Yeah. But look at Jordan Peterson, because it's the same. Like all of North America and Europe, the university systems are that way. They're all the way across. Both sides.
I don't think it's. I think in Canada it's a much larger issue than it is U.S. because they've got. We've got like Title IX, which is abortion of a title.
Didn't UC Berkeley ban Ben Shapiro from talking? And they called the local sheriff's department and said that if he went on the campus, he'd be trespassing and they would charge him.
I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, like it's not. It's not like think about that. Like that sounds extremely radical and insane to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just some loopy conservative who's all fucked up. But to tell somebody who wants to come and give a speech that doesn't use profanity, like he's not like a porn monger, or he's not promoting pedophilia or anything like that. He's just promoting religious values and conservative values. Right, like he's not even saying anything derogatory about people, right? Like nobody can really level anything of him like being a hate monger in any way, shape, or form. And you are telling him that if he steps 1 foot on your campus, the campus administration is telling him this, if he steps 1 foot on the campus, he will be arrested for trespassing because you think he's that fucking dangerous.
Yeah, I think that's part of the appeal. So like if you look at, it's so funny too when you look at it, because a lot of the progressive plans for society, a lot of the social planning that they do, involves looking at particular demographics of people and figuring out, how am I going to motivate this group of people to go and attend college, right? And that's as far as I can tell, that's as far as the thinking goes. Get them into university, get them to graduate with a degree. If they graduate with a degree, mission accomplished. And then you look at the appeals that they make to people, right? Who, like the demographics of people that they actually have been appealing: minorities and women.
Yep.
Women are extremely high in attendance in college or university, so mission accomplished there. But then when you go look at the actual debt that they're walking away from education with, right? They're not doing well. If they've actually managed to put in a much worse position.
Yeah, so if you back up in history, right? Go back to when women weren't really attending college, and there were women who attended college, and they literally went to college to find a husband, right? Find that pre-med student, find that pre-law student, and make him fall in love with you and ride his coattails to success, right? That I'm exaggerating, but there are women.
You sexist pig.
I love talking to old people because old people's give a fuck is gone. So like we're in the same wheelhouse when it comes to talking. And I've had women like in nursing homes telling me like that's exactly why they went to college. I was like, oh, you went to college? I was like, what'd you go to college for? And she said, to find a husband. Like, well, okay. I meant, what would you get your degree in? And she's like, oh, I don't remember. She didn't even care what she went to school for. She just picked something and went in hopes of meeting the man she would marry and spend the rest of her life with. I'm not faulting that in any way, shape, or form. But here's the problem: is if you're going to college to look for a husband, and I think it's 52% of college graduates are now female. If you're not a lesbian, the pickings got real slim for you real quick.
Well,
but here's the thing.
I mean, this is the funny thing too when you think about it.
Hold on. My whole point was that women didn't really go to college that much back then because they had different priorities. We convinced them to have different. By we, I mean the Democrats. I'm not actually a part of that we, but we'll just go with that. Convinced women to go to college to get degrees, and then all of a sudden the average earnings of college graduates went down because these women are picking low-income jobs and taking on the same debt as these men who are picking high-income jobs, like engineering. Like I think the top 8 jobs of the top 10 earning jobs, like prospective earnings in the future jobs, I think 8 of them are engineering. Virtually no women are going to school for engineering. If you are a woman going to school for engineering, you're beating the statistic, but the majority of them are going for things like childcare, early childhood development, education, like early education, and they're like, I want to be around babies and puppies all day. It's like, well, you're not going to make money doing that, because here's the thing: is that single mom who's got to put her kids in that Head Start or preschool program so she can go work full time, she can't afford to give you a 6-figure fucking income because she's not making a 6-figure income. It's like, so you're literally picking something that's putting you underneath. So you're getting a college education so that you can be underneath a hardworking single mom who's barely making enough, barely making a living wage, and then you're expecting to pay back your $100,000 student loan debt with that. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, and see, this is the funny thing is that when I look at these sort of social intervention programs that are based on this progressive stack, right? This idea that just all you have to do, right, is you just have to look at whoever's behind based on whatever arbitrary statistic you're looking at. Like, okay, so how many blacks are graduating from college? Okay, well, let's make that a priority based on race. Let's not look at anything else. Let's just simply look at that statistic, right? and let's get them into education, right? So what's happened in the U.S. anyway, that if you go look at the numbers on it from the Department of Education, they've enrolled a bunch of minorities into higher education, but there's no addressing of the underlying issue with that because they end up dropping out at extremely high numbers. So they'll attend 1 or 2 years worth of education, right? Then they'll drop out because the family will fall into a problem where they need somebody to go work, and this is primarily an issue with black men. They'll have to drop out of university, go help out with working and earning money for the family because of whatever issue that's come up, right? And so these same people will come back and look at the issue and they say, well, we got all these black people to university. What the hell happened? Why aren't they earning more money? Why aren't they, climbing out of the ravine, so to speak? And then they'll say, well, now they're settled. Now they're saddled with all of this education debt, so now we have to start building, debt forgiveness programs. And the problem, as soon as you start intervening in the system, right, the problem self-perpetuates. It gets bigger and bigger. Like now you've got a bunch of minorities that don't have degrees. Now they have debt. Now what do?
Right.
And it's the same thing with women because, with women, it's like you're not directing. Well, they're now trying to direct women to STEM, and they're getting a shit ton of pushback from that because a lot of women don't want to go in. Yeah, because they realized that a lot of women were like, okay, sure, I'll go to university. They go to university for some dumb fuck degree. They don't get a job afterwards, and they end up in a shit ton of debt. Okay, well, you just doubled the problem, So it's like you can't. Well, it's that old adage: you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Well, no,
right?
It's not that. It's you're telling women that they need to go out there, be in the workplace, and be economic equals to men, which I very strongly and adamantly feel that is extremely detrimental to the economy of any country. It's a very bad way to go about. That's like the type of things that communist countries do to keep worker costs down, right?
You flood the market with labor.
Stupid idea because it's not like there was triple the job market of the available workforce. Right, which if you then doubled your workforce, be like, okay, but they're actively seeking to double the workforce, but the job market isn't double what the workforce already was. So right. It's just pushing down wages. But if you look, the college, and then they're like, oh, we have to raise the minimum wage because, hey, look at that, we artificially push down wages. Now we need to artificially raise the wages. Also, we're going to skyrocket and inflate the education cost, and then this is how we'll fix it. We'll get it to where jobs now require degrees for jobs where like 10 years ago the thought of having a degree and working that job meant you fucked up somewhere in your life. Now they're trying to make that a requirement to have a degree just to get into this job where you're like, it's $12 an hour. That's fucking nothing, right? Like 10 years ago, $12 an hour was less than what I was making as a 16-year-old in high school. Now there's jobs, and this is the same exact job market, right? I moved back to the same fucking place. $12 an hour. They want a college degree. Like I didn't even have a high school diploma or a driver's license, and I was making more than that. So something. Well, obviously, all the policies are conflicting with each other and making it worse on everyone they're trying to help.
Well, that's a funny thing with degrees too. It's because now that everyone is going out and getting degrees, quote unquote. What they're doing is they're flooding the market with labor that is artificially inflated in value. So like all of these people, sure, they have degrees, but do they know how to do anything? No.
Well, no, it's not only that. If you just put it this way, right? Like say there's a job market that exists. So in any job market, and it requires a certificate, okay? The more people who have that certificate versus the number of jobs, the lower your earning potential is going to be. The more people in that field, if the job market is fairly static in that particular field, the more people who get that degree, the less money you're going to make because it becomes more competitive for you. This is what so there were jobs where they required a degree, but now they're forcing everyone to get a degree, and there are companies that require degrees. It's like we want people with bachelor's, master's, and doctors, but we don't care what they're in, right? We don't care what your degree is in. We need the bragging rights of this, of like 60% of our workforce is college graduates, right? And it makes us look more prestigious to our prospective clients. The problem is the more people you give degrees to, the less your degree is worth, because more people have degrees, the value of it goes down. It's basic economics, which is also not taught in college, right? Like that should, all freshmen should be getting taught economics. Right? I don't care what your major is in. I don't care if you're a pre-med student. I don't care if you're going to fucking menstrual blood art degree. You should be taught basic economics as a requirement your freshman year.
We should, yeah, I think education should address that as well as civics, to be honest with you.
Yeah, on the public education side, that's where I think civics should be. I think in high school they should be very heavy on civics, ensuring that you know math. Right, like the ability of people to do math these days coming out of high school. I thought I was bad. No, it only got worse. Like I've always sucked at math. But these people are literally allowed to use calculators on their math tests, and they're not like, you know, like algebra and calculus shit. It's basic fucking multiplication and division math. It's like, why are you allowing them to use a calculator? Like they're not even using their brain at that point. They're just putting that information into a device and regurgitating the answer. So civics, math, and then literature, like your actual ability to read and write, is literacy, I guess I should say. Those should be the most important things in our public education system. And literature is, I meant to say literacy. Literature is. I took American literature, European literature, and English literature. They were all required courses for me to take in high school. None of them actually addressed grammar, you know, reading and writing and those things. Even though for the high school I was at, there was almost 20% illiteracy, 12% illiteracy rate for graduates.
Yeah, I always find that baffling, like how they're moving people forward in grades, but then, you know, you still have this massive issue with literacy. You'd think you would hold them back and say, okay.
You'd think you would fix the education system and be like, why the fuck are we getting so many students to graduation that are getting diplomas that can't even read their own goddamn name on the diploma?
Right.
You think the schools would address that themselves and be like, hey, maybe we're failing, but no, they don't give a fuck. They don't care. You turned it into a government bureaucracy, and now it doesn't give a fuck about the product it produces.
No, it cares about it. It cares about its. Yeah, it cares about its funding first, because that's the that's the requirement. So, just so you know, your stream is coming in very quietly, apparently. I don't know if you want to take a listen to it. So, just so you know, your stream is coming in very quietly, apparently.
That's weird. Hold on. It doesn't seem too quiet on my end, but...
Is it coming through okay, then?
It should get louder now. A little bit louder now.
Yeah, but, yeah, there's a myriad of issues with the education system, and I think the problem... One of the big problems that I think the U.S. has is that we have this tendency to try to, rather than looking at simplifying the system to make it easier for people to get into, right, or redirecting people to pathways that are going to be more beneficial to them, we have this tendency to just simply throw money at problems. So we always.
Yeah. And they always blame capitalism. It's like that isn't how capitalism works. Like that's why you need to learn economics, because that's not capitalism, right?
Well, yeah, and yeah, I mean that is an issue. I mean, if you're going through and just throwing money at this issue, right? You're gonna see exactly what happened in the public school system, right? Which you were talking about earlier, with basically the allocation of publicly earmarked funds to schools. Going to, not to salaries or infrastructure or things for the students or books or things like that, but going to maybe like the principal of the school or spiffs or things like that. Like there's really no oversight on that. So you can't just write a blank check and expect that the problem is going to solve itself. Just the same way you can't just flood the market with loans and expect people to use those loans responsibly. They won't. Especially 18-year-old kids. They're not going to be responsible.
I don't want to harp on the public education aspect of the lower education, but I do feel it's necessary at this point to point out that when teachers are complaining about their income, you do have to realize that they work the equivalent of 7 months a year, right? At schools that are considered year-round schools like California, and they work 6 months a year at schools throughout the majority of the country, which means that they're making the equivalent of about double of what their actual salary is, because they could work an entire second job somewhere doing something entirely else, because they don't, we don't have time, like I have to pay for school supplies out of my own pocket. It's like, yeah, you're making $40,000 and working half the year. That's the equivalent of making $80,000 a year. Stop bitching you don't make enough money and start educating the goddamn children.
Well, yeah, so there's this it's a myth. I don't know how else to put it. There's this myth out there that if you pay people more money, they will do a better job.
I would say that myth is only partially wrong, because the wording of it, right? If you pay people more money for doing a good job, you'll keep them around and they'll keep doing good job.
Well, the way that it works in every other industry other than education, for some reason,
right,
is that essentially wages are negotiated by the standard going wage for, I guess what you would call an equivalent workforce. So, person X has, a certain amount of qualifications, certain number of years in a workforce, and a lot of larger corporations will then put that into a tiered structure, right? So like they'll have like tier 1 through 10, and those are all pay scales. So tier 3 makes more than tier 2, tier 2 makes more than tier 1, et cetera, right?
Sure.
And by doing it that way, what that forces the labor market to do is compete with each other, right? And then that also forces the employers to then have to compete with other employers to say, well, I want the best work for my money. What are my competitors doing, right? How much are they paying? And then they have to go through and moderate how much they're actually offering to their employees. And that actually will drive wages up if left alone. Yeah. But in education, for whatever reason, there's this notion that if you just simply pay people more, like say you just offer people a higher wage.
No, that's not how. Well, I don't know if you're talking about college or lower education. In lower education, that's not how it works at all.
In lower education?
Yeah, lower education is you are paid for the time. If you manage to not get fired, you get a raise.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
That's fucking salary. That's it. You can be the worst fucking teacher in the school district. If they didn't fire you, you get a raise.
Well, that's what I see there. It's a salaried position, right? Which, what a lot of teachers are arguing now. I've seen this in Arizona as well. Well, Arizona was a separate issue, but there's this argument out there that the wages are too low for educators, and because of that, just to start out anyway, because they're making somewhere in the ballpark of $30,000-$40,000 a year to start, and this is like their first year out of education, right?
Yeah.
And that is too low to have motivated, strong educators wanting to sign up for the position, so that they need to increase the wages. And my position on that is why is it that we treat education differently than we treat any other job out there? If the employees of a particular school had to actually compete for their wages, that's naturally going to drive up the skill level and the commitment of the employee base, and that's also naturally going to draw up the wages. And then all of the people who have gotten degrees who are not going to be giving too much of a shit about their job, right? Because what you're doing right now with this system is you're incentivizing teachers to just simply get into the bottom and then ride it out.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing is, I didn't want to harp on public education, but the tenure system should not exist in public education. Period. Period. And there is a tenure-like system which is propped up by the teachers' unions, and so like once you've been there X amount of time, which I think the average is like 4 or 6 years of being a teacher. So if you've managed to not get fired in that time, you pretty much can't get fired. I mean, there are teachers who are molesting their students and feeding them semen and shit, like all sorts of weird shit, and that is like actual felony criminal child sexual abuse shit, and they still can't be fired.
Yeah, tenure's sort of a weird concept.
Tenure only makes sense in one particular context, okay? And that is research. Because then you can get super weird with your research and they can't fire you, right? Like you grind doing the research that the university wants you to do. You get tenure, now you can get a little weird with it and research the things that you've really wanted to research your whole life, because that advances, you know, like whatever scientific field you're in. It doesn't really make sense in law or medicine for educators to get tenure, because what's the point of giving them tenure, right? I don't want a medical professor who's like, I'm going to start getting weird with the way I teach these new doctors. No, I want you to teach them that basic shit, all right? I want them to know how to doctor the right way, right? This is the way they should be doing it. I don't want you to get all crazy with it. And with lawyers, right? Why is a law professor getting tenure? He's not just suddenly going to start teaching the law differently, right? The law is the law. I hope there's only one way that the law is supposed to be interpreted. I don't want, you know, weird lawyers out there who are like, what do words even mean, man? Like, no, that's not what we need. But when you're talking about scientific research, even the gender studies researchers, right? I can even see that because, you know, every university has humanities and they do research papers that come out, and I fucking hate 80% of them that come out. But even they should get tenure so they can research and post whatever findings they get without fear of losing their job if it doesn't follow the university's narrative. Right?
Right.
I can get behind that, even for the degree fields that do research that I don't think should even exist. But other things, they shouldn't, right? Like economics. Why does your economics professor need tenure? Why does he need to be secure that he's not going to get fired from his job? Economics is economics, right? It's not going to magically change because he got tenure. Know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say probably. I mean, the idea behind it was to protect intellectual diversity, and it's funny because when you look at it, I'm not entirely convinced that we accomplished that.
We definitely did.
Based on looking at the
I'm telling you, there's entire fields that have zero conservatives in them. Right?
I think that there are plenty of fields out there that would never attract conservatives because it's like, I mean, go look at...
No, even the things that you would think there would be conservatives in, you're still looking at like a 30-to-1 or higher liberal to conservative leaning. Right? So you're doing one guy, and how many universities have 30 professors in any given field? Right? So what are the chances that you have a conservative professor in any given field at a university when the best statistic, I think, was 32-to-1 of liberal versus conservative? Right? So...
Well, it's also got to... I mean... Yeah, I mean, it's also got to do with, like, you know, you look at... I think there's a natural predilection for women to decide to be Democrats in this country because... Well,
actually, no. They tend to do what their husbands do, which is part of why the Democrats were... Because hardworking men who are supporting a family tend to go conservative more often than not, statistically speaking. And wives tend to follow the political leanings of their husbands. So, let's cut the husbands out. Problem solved. Now, single women lean a lot more Democrat because the Democrats are like, single women and women have the power and the men are the evil, oppressive patriarchy. Vote Democrat.
Yeah, I think that's the appeal being made. That's why I think you see a lot more women in...
Single women.
Single women in education, right? Which sort of redoubles.
Well, that's not a narrative thing. Them being in education is their natural biological urges taking effect. I'm not joking, and anybody can disagree if they want, but they're just disagreeing with science.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked into that, to be honest with you. I think that, I think that all you'd have to do is just look at the.
Jordan Peterson, I think he either did a paper, or no, he did a paper on the research study, or on research studies that talked about that, and that the more free that the society was. So like our society is very free on what we can do with our lives. You actually see the clear division between men and women and the choices that they make, specifically when it comes to careers. And women tend to go for the nurturing, caring, especially child rearing things when they're free to choose whatever they want, because it's their natural biological urge as being women is to care for children and animals and small defenseless critters. That's what they want to do.
That I mean, that's borne out in the Scandinavian studies. I forget the country, but basically there's an international ranking system for countries as far as gender equality. So basically, having a more egalitarian society where everybody can choose what they want to do, and it does actually divide the sexes into particular labor forces.
Well, it's a deeper divide the more free the society is. And that's what I'm saying. Like, so women choosing education isn't they're being urged to do that by anybody. They're following their natural predisposition to go into that type of work, right? Like that's why nursing tends to be popular with women. Is nurses are actually the caregiver. The doctors are the cold asshole who cuts you open and pulls stuff out of you. The nurse is the actual one who does the caregiving aspect of it, which is why it's more appealing to women than it is to men, right? That's why you see such a divide between those two on genders. The cold calculating nature of a doctor, right? Like personally, my appeal when I was considering going to school to be a doctor was literally that. Like, oh, it's puzzles and things to figure out. Like there's the unseen, so I just get that surface level of what the idiot's telling me, and then I have to decipher that into intellectual speak to determine what's actually wrong with them so I can treat it. Like the concept of taking care of this person and making them better wasn't even a consideration in my mind. Whereas when I was talking to Carla about why she wants to go to nursing school, it's helping people. And I was like, oh, right. I didn't even think about, like, of course, obviously being a doctor is helping people, but that concept didn't even come into play in my mind when considering it.
Oh yeah, you ask any guy, right? What's firstly out of a guy's mouth?
Titties?
Money. It's money. Dude, every guy I've ever asked, it's like their main concern, especially when they get to the point where they're thinking about a family, first thing in their brain is money. They want the higher paying professions because they know they need it.
Well, yeah, and that's it's funny because it's hard to make the evolutionary argument, but there is data to support it. Not enough to call it definitive, but it exists. The male's desire for higher earning jobs, right? Like when you're looking at a job, you're looking at what the earning potential is of that job. More often than not, when it comes to men, it translates over to the being the provider, where you go back to like the caveman. It was being big and strong and carrying a nice sharp stick to stab people with, and being able to hunt woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers to feed the woman and protect your cave. I think that's translated over the way like we've adapted to the new form of hunting, which is making money, right? Like we're not killing the woolly mammoth to feed our family and provide a warm blanket. We have to get the money instead of sharpening a spear and go buy those things instead of killing them. I think we've adapted to that. But since this economic system hasn't existed nearly as long as those other things, there's arguments to be made that it's some kind of social construct of the patriarchy to oppress us somehow.
Yeah,
sadly, the evidence of it being evolutionary and the evidence of it being the evil patriarchy meant to keep us down, and we all need to join the proletariat. They're actually about equal when it comes to evidence.
Oh, it's amazing! Like what a twisted web you have to weave to like get people to believe things that go against their individual natures. Just like I was talking about earlier, like redoubling the issue with trying to push women into STEM fields, or um, getting impoverished people into education. You know, it's one of those things where, yeah, you can do it, but 90% of the time you're going to be creating other issues that have to be dealt with after that, and it becomes like a self-perpetuating cycle. So it's no wonder to me why a politician. It makes the Democrats make a lot more sense to me now. Um, you know, because they've become the party of give, and the reason is because the social programs and interventions that they try to put in place create this cascade effect of other issues and other interventions that need to be done to correct for the old interventions to be done. Now we have the student loan bubble coming up. Now we have to deal with that. Now we're going to have to figure out some way to, you know, deal with debt forgiveness on a massive national scale. And it's this self-perpetuating cycle. And eventually it's going to hit the wall. Eventually you just run out of other people's money.
I have the solution. And nobody on the left's gonna like it. I can guarantee that. And probably the majority of people on the right would not publicly support it, like politician-wise, right? But one, the only student loans available would be for, say, the top 25 estimated high-earning jobs, right? So the high-demand jobs of the future, right? So if they're every couple of years they would reassess it, right? So the Department of Education needs to be scaled down dramatically. This is one of the few things where it should even exist, is the student loan. And so that what it would do is, so these 25 jobs are the job markets that are going to be blowing up, that are going to be in high demand in the next 5 to 10 years. So over the next 5 to 10 years, that is what student loans are available for. Right, not everything for that. Maybe you could add things like medical. I'm trying to. I forgot what they're called. The jobs that are like consistent jobs that are needed there, right? So like if you're like, these are jobs that are constantly always needing people in them, maybe you could justify that, but not everything like we're doing now. But the top 25 growing jobs that are going to be, you know, like high potential earning jobs are the only things that are available. So if you're not going into that degree, you're not getting federal aid. It's just that. That's it. It's that simple. You can apply to scholarships from the schools. You can get loans from the bank, but the government is not giving you a penny unless you're going into something that is for, as the fucking preamble of the Constitution says, towards the general welfare of the nation. Right? Your own personal happiness does not matter to the country at large, right? There are 360 million people. You're only fucking one of them. Get over yourself.
Well, yeah, and that makes perfect sense to me. You know, like, that's an easy thing to accomplish as well. And then it's not as though, because a lot of people will scream, well, you're defunding the programs that you don't like. Here's it.
Well, here's the thing. Mine does not have a bias beyond what is the most economically beneficial to the nation. And that's it. That's the only criteria.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the thing, though, is that those other institutions can still exist. They would just have to be, you know, like an actual, like, for-profit college, private institution, and then people with wealthy parents.
No, here's the thing. I'm not talking about the states, right? So in the states, they run state community colleges, and they run state university circuits, right? So most of the community colleges are actually state funded as well. There's no problem with them doing that. That they existed before the Department of Education, and they'll continue to exist. And some states see them as beneficial and have more of them. Some don't and have virtually none of them. That's on each of those states to decide, and for those taxpayers to vote in those people into office. I'm talking about actual financial aid being given to the student to pay for their tuition should only be for what is considered economically beneficial to the country, because that's the only thing the government should be concerned with. I don't care your race, your gender, or anything like that. I care what your economic impact is going to be on this country, and it better be a positive one. And if we're going to have a policy, it should be the aim to make sure that you're a positive one.
Yeah, that's partially, you know, and this is the one thing I always look at. I look to the German system of education as an example. The one thing that the German schools are very cut down, like universities anyway. It's very basic. It's essentially the building, the classroom, the teachers. That's
Right.
it. It's fully state funded, so it's just basically an extrapolation of the general like public education system for like general education, and then there's a competition system in place for the school. So basically, you have to get a particular, you have to get particular grades to qualify to beat out the other students to get into the school, right? Or you're put on a wait list and you try again. And the system is extremely threadbare. So basically, what the majority of the funds go to are the actual building where you think of a college university campus, without the dorms, without the fucking I forget what they even call it, where you go eat. There's a name for that shit.
All the amenities.
All of the extra crap. It's just the buildings where you go and take the education, take classwork, right?
Right.
And then they only support degrees that are in industries that they know that the country is promoting. Now, I don't fully agree with the whole system because Germany is very institutionalist. They're what they basically have a from cradle to grave sort of mentality with their citizenry.
Yeah.
I don't think it necessarily should be that way for the U.S., but like I don't agree with like full state funding of the schools, for example. I think people can pay their own way for that kind of stuff. But if money is going out in form of grants or in loans to students, then yeah, I definitely think that that should be in industries or growth sectors within the U.S. And that's
Right.
an easy thing to study, right? It should really be that simple, right? But for whatever reason, and like I said, I think this goes into what I was saying earlier about the way that people view education in this country, right? They view it as becoming part of the I don't know, the elite, if you will, by going and getting your education at a particular university. It hardly even matters what subject you get it in, right? Being able to say that I have this piece of paper from XYZ University, right?
Right.
And that's, I think, a problem with with our culture, particularly. We're not work driven anymore, and I think that's a problem. I think that's one of the main issues.
One of the things. Here's the thing: is like Harvard and Princeton. Other than there were some things that I was reading that gave me pause, but that was like 2 years ago. When it comes to their diversity student body practices, but by and large, it really doesn't matter what you're going. Like, I had a lieutenant. He went to Princeton for political science, which is, I mean, before I learned about gender studies, I thought was the most worthless degree you could get in college. And then I learned about gender studies. I'm like, oh, never mind. There is things more worthless than political science as a major.
Yeah.
And so then he joins the Marine Corps because you need a degree to be an officer now. So he joins and he serves his 5 years. He gets out. He now works in D.C. at a law firm. And because he went to Princeton, right, obviously he makes himself a shoe-in for these nice six-figure jobs. Then he's got his military service to add on that. So it's not like so much a bragging right as it is like having a membership card to get into places you're not going to get into. So even if you go for something as stupid as political science at Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Oxford, even Berkeley, you're getting the membership card, like the exclusive Sam's Club card. Now you get these deals that you would not have been getting if you got the same exact degree anywhere else. So it isn't I went to Harvard and then that's it. It's you went to Harvard, which means that other places where people went to Harvard, they have like a camaraderie, brotherhood, and they're more apt to hire you if you went to Harvard. People respect Harvard because of the rigors of the education system. Like Ben Shapiro saying, he graduated from Harvard, and people were literally coming and interviewing and trying to sell him on taking a job with them, instead of how if you graduate from other colleges like UCLA, you're going and you're trying to sell yourself to 30 companies. If you graduate from Harvard, 30 companies are trying to sell themselves to you, right? And so it's far beyond bragging rights. Like there's a real tangible benefit no matter what your degree is in from going to places like that. But those places are removed from the general college and the general population, right? Like
Yeah.
If you apply to Princeton, do you think you would have got in? I would have had a better chance because I had two people who went to Princeton that were willing to write me letters of recommendation to go to Princeton, which yeah, as I said, it's a brotherhood, so there's the alumni. Like, so I'd have a better chance than others, but I'm not very confident that I would have gotten in. Do you think when you graduated high school, if you would apply, do you think you would have got in?
Probably not. I doubt it. I mean, I graduated with a full ride scholarship. That was just to a state university.
Right.
So,
yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It's the competitive nature of going to places like that. Like, just getting in is an achievement in and of itself, being completely honest. And then you got to graduate, right? This is why, like, people bash George W. Bush. Like, didn't he go to Harvard and Princeton and get degrees from both? Like, oh, his daddy paid for that. It's like, well... clearly he got his money's worth out of it because the motherfucker was on boards making millions of dollars in the oil field. Then he was the governor of Texas, then the president of the United States. He owns a huge ass fucking ranch that's paying him like something like $100,000 a day he's making off of the land that he owns. So clearly he got his money's worth, even if his daddy didn't pay for the degree.
Well, I mean, this is, I think, probably another thing that American culture has sort of gotten away from is that, you know, we're the land of opportunity, right? Yeah. Well, you know, that opportunity, you know, it was supposed to be across time. What I mean by that is like, if you come here, you're going to be poor as fuck, probably for your entire life, right? But you have the opportunity to
unless you're Elon Musk.
Unless you're Elon Musk, yeah. But your kids will have the opportunity to go to school, to get an education, to possibly, if they work hard, do just a little bit better than you. And then if they work hard, then their children will be able to do a little bit better than them. And
no, actually, there's a big jump for second-generation Americans. Right? It's not like a small step up. You're talking like 30,000, 40,000 increase in income annually from their parents, easily.
Well, I've never looked into it because I just don't. It's never really. It's never bothered me enough to look into it. But like the question of how, the question of how the Japanese recovered so quickly after the internment in the U.S. and why and how they're earning so much. Part of it has, I would imagine, anyway. This is all just guesswork, but I would imagine part of it has to do with immigration from Japan in the intervening period, but a lot of it, I think, is that they have a very close-knit, strong family tie.
Yeah, exactly. That is the number one determining factor for immigrant success and within the country. The number one determining factor is your family and community ties.
Right, because they pass their wealth on to the next generation, right, and their next generation does better. They build on that wealth, and then that allows them to move up the chain. I see a lot of people in this country, anyway, who aren't family planning, right? They don't care about. I mean, I'm included in that bucket, by the way. They're not planning for families. They're not. You know, there's a lot of people in this country who would rather go buy the really nice. You know, they get a nice job or they get a decent job anyway. They're much more interested in going and purchasing the nice Lexus to be able to drive around rather than saving that money, buying like an economy vehicle, and then saving to purchase a home, which is actually going to net them more income or wealth overall in their lifetime, something that they'll actually be able to pass on to their children. And you know, that's another cultural issue I see. And I'm going to tie it back to the religion, man. So I have to. But you know, I think that a lot of atheists, and this is a funny thing, they don't breed as much as religious people. And I think it's because, you know, when you don't have a mentality towards a purpose-driven life, right? You're probably going to be a lot more likely to be a hedonist or be hedonistic at least, and much more interested in the here and now because, well, you're going to die and then it's all over, right?
Right.
And the Japanese, for example, right? They're not extremely religious people, but the one religion that they do practice,
kind of, sort of, like they're well,
and
they've moved away
worship
from
their
it. Yeah, they worship their ancestors.
Shinto.
Regardless of any other type of religious affiliation, like even in Christian convert Japanese people, they still do that, and that's I think that's a very important aspect, like the Jewish culture, right? So Jewish communities, they prop up and people talk about how isolated the Jewish communities are, and that's part of the reason why the Jews have such a hard time in other cultures. They don't not assimilate, but they do take aspects of the host culture into their own culture, but by and large they keep their own. And that's because in like the religious practices, like Yom Kippur just ended tonight, right? So it started last night and it ended tonight, and you can't use electricity. You can't use your phone or watch TV or do the internet. You can't eat or drink. Right? It's a day of going to synagogue and praying. But here's the thing: if you can't drive and you don't live in a Jewish community, you're not close enough to walk to the synagogue, right? So if you're adhering to the religion, you actually have to be close to the synagogue. It's why the community pops up. That's why the Jewish Community Center in the Olive Garden, you're like, the Jewish community is right there, is because the structure of the community, so even beyond the family, like the entire community, that revolves around that singular thing. And it's very much about celebrating the history of the Jewish people, right? And so you get that close-knit community ties that you don't get in the broader civilization, right? There's nothing that's tying like a white suburban community together, really, right? Some of them might play cards together. Some of them might be in the neighborhood, watch together. Their kids play sports at school, and you carpool. But there's no strong community bond tie where you're all congregating on a regular basis and relying on each other. Like if there's a death, you go through mourning in the Jewish religion. The community comes and they bring you food because you're not supposed to cook. You're supposed to be mourning the whole time, and the community is supposed to come and basically take care of you while you're mourning the loss of your family member. And you do it for like a week, right? So like 7 days, you're sitting Shiva, right? So you're doing this for 7 days when somebody dies, and the community comes and they're bringing you food and their condolences and paying their respects for your loss. Right? If you don't live in a Jewish community, you can't really do that. You know what I mean? You're going to be starving and dehydrating for 7 days while you're mourning the loss of your family member if you're not in the community. There's no ties like that in American culture, right?
Right.
And in Jewish culture, they do have the ties to the ancestry, and they have their customs, and they if they keep to things that tie the community together, but the family bonds are very, very strong and very deep, right? So like everything you do is a reflection upon your ancestors, and you are supposed to respect and worship your ancestors, and you seek guidance from them, like they're angels or priests. And so when you do things, you're dishonoring the legacy of the people who came before you and your family, and so you do get the same type of thing, just in a different way that you get in the Jewish community. And they're both very successful.
Right, it's the same general effect, but the general idea, and we had it in the U.S. for a long time, anyway. But general idea is you build on what your family has, what your family has already built, and the idea is just to do a little bit better, And
well, Europe kind of had that. They did the coat of arm lineage thing. And you like had your family name and stuff like that, but they never really got that deep into it.
I think
it really hasn't.
Was, yeah. Oh, I don't think
it's hit or miss when you're outside the nobility. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I don't think any of this was necessarily conscious. Like I don't think anybody sat down and thought, okay, so how are we going to like naturally reinforce traditional values within a culture in order to make sure that people are being constantly reminded of what their values should be, because it's going to be better for everyone.
Well, I mean, the Jews did that. That is like literally the purpose.
Yeah, well, the Jews have been around the Jews have been around for a very long time.
There was a lot of trial and error way back in the day. And they're like, you know what? We should really codify this into a code so that we stop fucking this up.
Well, yeah, and I think it was probably just a natural process of trial and error. And other cultures have realized this, and I don't think that it's been articulated to people. So like now that
the Europeans were like, oh well, we need to fix these mistakes we keep making. Instead of coming up with something good like Judaism, they're like, communism. We'll just murder millions of people. This will fix it. Problem solved, guys. And then now the new communists are like, that wasn't real communism. Give me the power. I'll show you real communism.
Well, see, that's the funny thing is that it almost like, there's a cycle with it. It's just like we were talking about education, we're talking about the naturally like perpetuating cycles of problems that happen when you start intervening in society. It's sort of the same way with like these state-led programs where you're using a system like atheism, right? Where you're not going to have a natural, like, God doesn't exist, right, in this system. Right. So, but something must occupy the highest office in the land, or the highest echelon in a given stratification of people. So if it's not God, it's what else could it be other than the state, right?
Yeah.
And then that's what then has to reinforce all of the value structures for people. And it's like, well, I don't know about you, but I'm not really particularly interested in looking up to somebody like John McCain, because it's really easy for me to fucking sit here and mock the ever-loving shit out of somebody like John McCain. But too. You give me like a metaphysical concept like God, well, that's going to be a lot more difficult. Like I might be able to sit there and be like, well, I mean, it doesn't exist, like God not real. But if you can articulate the reason why the concept of God is there, why it's just this signifier of that which is like perfect, it's much more difficult to criticize as a concept.
Well, depending how Jewish one might be, the Judaism is pretty dark. It's like, there is a God. He doesn't actually answer your prayers. He doesn't give a fuck about you. And he's occasionally prone to genociding entire civilizations on a whim. It's like, so he's like an all-powerful being, and he is perfect, but he's perfect in a way that is beyond the capability of our understanding. His existence is beyond the capability of our understanding. And all of these mitzvahs or rules that we have to follow that are set out, like, okay, yeah, you don't get it, they don't make sense, well, that doesn't really matter because he does, and, well, you can follow them or not. It's not necessarily going to make your life better. Like in the religion, it's not like if you're a good Jew, good things will happen to you. It's like even if you're a good Jew, some crazy guy with a mustache might throw you in a gas chamber because fuck you, you're a Jew. There's no upside selling point. It's like no matter how good of a Jew you are, bad things are going to happen to you. You might have a very miserable life, but that's no excuse to not be a good Jew, right? And that's hard to sell to people, especially like if you look at our culture today of the because you go back to like Karl Marx when he's writing the Communist Manifesto, he's got the same whiny bullshit that we're seeing that people are complaining about from the generations today, right? It's like it's not a new thought up thing, so it's really hard to be like, hey, Judaism is the way to be, when it's like, well, what is the benefit? There isn't one. You still get the plague and die. You might get genocided. People hate us all around the world. We are the subject of literal genocidal rage on a regular basis, and you still might not get to heaven no matter how good you are. And in some Jewish sects, there is no heaven at all. So like you die, you're just worm food. Like so, literally, I have to follow all of this shit and do all these things, and in the end, it doesn't do anything for you. But it's just the right thing to do. Right? That's a hard pitch to sell, but if you look at the Jewish culture, they're successful everywhere they are, right?
Right. That's the thing is that the proof is really in pudding. I mean, I can't tell you how many, like, I don't know how many atheists you run into.
Oh, a lot, all the time.
Every time I run into an atheist, like an out and out, God not real, I'm an anti-theist, but I'll never tell you atheist.
Right.
They are the most miserable people. Like
Yeah.
it's incredible to me. Like I've never met like a happy-go-lucky, well-spirited atheist. I always meet the ones who are like, oh, doom and gloom and every. Like the perfect example is the Fedora Lord himself, Amazing Atheist or TJ.
Yeah.
Oh my God, if he's not like the fucking poster child of everything
For
atheist.
why not to be an atheist? Right?
Oh God, yeah, exactly. It's just like you miss the entire point of religion. You leapfrog over it, and your prize for this is just like he's the most miserable person I've ever like seen on YouTube.
Well,
And
well, here's the thing. This is what I always find funny, and it annoys people,
yeah,
which just makes it better for me. Have you read Genesis? Right. So, like, you know, people always talk about, you know, like God saw that it was dark, and you know, he separated the night from the day. He said, "Let there be light." He saw the light, and it was good. Right? Does that sound familiar?
Mhm.
So, right. So, when you go through that, there's some of it that not quite making of sense, right? But if you consider like the theory of how the universe came into existence, right? The Big Bang Theory. And then you read Genesis, and you don't try to take Genesis like absolutely literal as being 7 days. It lines up pretty perfectly. So from the beginning of the universe to the existence of man on Earth, that's about how that both of those theories play out. The only difference is Genesis says, you know, it was a day, right? So we make the 7-day thing, right? That's the big contention when it comes to Genesis. That's why God's not real and didn't create the universe, because Genesis was 7 days, and obviously it took millions of years. It's like, obviously God is an omnipotent being living in the fucking, you know, in some other dimension that we can't even conceive of, if God is real. So you honestly think his day would be the same thing, right? Like the concept of what we've declared a day versus God's concept of time, you think is just the same, right? That's the atheist contention. Like just when you start on the first page of the Bible, that's their problem. Like, oh, obviously everything didn't get created in 7 days. It's like, well, do you think a creature such as God would have the same concept of time, considering it's literally lived, if we're to be, what is it, the universe is estimated at, you know, hundreds of billions of years old. It's like, so if he actually did create the entire universe, he's hundreds of billions of years old. Do you think his concept of time is the same as us who live 100 years?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't typically get into these debates because it's
I'm saying like the timeline, the way it plays out in Genesis,
yeah, sure.
is the same as the theory of how the entire universe formed from the start of it till our existence. And now I'm not saying that's proof of anything, but I'm saying it's kind of funny where you're harping on the 7 days thing and completely ignoring how the time, or you're harping on the timeline, but ignoring how these people who wrote this book, 6,000 years ago, before any of the scientific research and knowledge that existed that allowed us to calculate that ever existed, if they completely made it up, how did they get so close to being right? Seems like a question an atheist should probably bother with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, as far as like the timelines of God go and stuff like that, I don't even necessarily see that as the most important thing.
Well,
I'm more of like
that's my point. I'm like, well, it's a book written by man, and we're not only any man, like feeble-minded dude 7,000 years ago, right? So
yeah.
You know, like if the part that they got wrong was making it 7 days, I think that's actually really good for people who literally had no education at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's and the thing about religion too is that it does evolve over time. Like the type of teachings or beliefs that we have now, I'm sure, are miles different than the sort of religious education or religious tradition
Says you,
practices.
but I'm going to teach my kids the benefit of Jewish slavery. Bringing it back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so that's my point though, is that religion's modernized with people, and the reason that religion is still here, I mean, if you look at a lot of the Christian faith, a lot of that evolved out of an agrarian state, and now that I think the reason that people are having such an issue with concept of faith now, I don't think it has that much to do with science necessarily. I think the main problem is that our lifestyles are evolving so rapidly now due to technology that religion is having a hard time keeping up and mapping onto the needs of the people. The spiritual needs are still there. If the spiritual needs weren't there, then the Marxists would never be able to gain any ground, right? Because what they're offering is a different code of, humanist ethics that aren't really fleshed out very well, but that's what they're offering. And it's because people have an inbuilt need for spirituality, tradition, hierarchy, stratification, because we're social creatures and we're thinking creatures. And I think that's the reason that you look at the Christian faith and why it's sort of in an ebb right now, is because it's having a difficulty keeping up with the technological advances that we've had in society. So like, whereas Christianity was a system built around and for people living in more of an agrarian state where you were,
I actually blame Catholicism.
I'm not a theologian.
Okay, so like the general history of Catholicism in Europe, right? You got the Crusades where they're like, oh yeah, rape and murder whoever the fuck you want. Jesus forgives you so long as you're slaughtering Muslims. It's like, okay, I'm cool with the slaughtering of the Muslim part, but we're literally going to forgive anything you do? That's not right. But also, like a lot of people don't know, the Catholic Church would not teach people how to read so that only the people who were in the Catholic Church could read the scripture. So then they could tell you it said whatever the fuck they wanted to tell you that it said. You weren't allowed to read it, right? And so they were gatekeepers of the religion, and they used it to oppress people. Like you have things like the Spanish Inquisition where they were torturing Jews to accept Jesus Christ. Joke's on you, because if you accept Jesus Christ, we kill you, but your soul is quote unquote saved. And if you didn't, then you got cut in half by a pendulum, right? Like that's the type of shit the Catholic Church was doing. Burning witches at the stake in Salem was a religious driven thing to use. It's been used primarily as a club, like Christianity, specifically the Catholic Church and the Puritans have used it as a club to control people, right? Like it was for power and money. That's why the Catholic Church is the richest organization in the world. But now you got the Pope sucking the dick of Muslims while his priests are out there raping children, and he's like, the question isn't rape. The question is, why are you turning your back on the church? It's like, because of the rape. The answer to that is the question that you're ignoring. Right? Like, it's fucking mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And the Catholic Church just has a very long history of like being paid by kings so that countries, like a king's like, I want to declare one another king. We're both in the Holy Roman Empire, and then that king would pay the Pope. The Pope would bless the war against his own other subjects, right? So like he's like the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, and the king has to get permission from the Pope to go to war against other peoples who are a member of the Catholic Church who also have to answer to the Pope. So it's like he's basically getting paid to allow one group of people to slaughter another group of people, but they're all answerable to him. Like they all worship at his altar. It's like that's super fucked up. And so yeah, it's really easy to point to like the real world history beyond pointing to problems with scripture and saying that's a fucked up organization. Like what was the guy in Texas who had the big super mega church, but he said he wouldn't open it because it was flooded, but people went out there and took pictures and it was fine. And he has this big huge mega fucking church he wouldn't open up to the people being displaced by the hurricanes last year. You remember that?
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
Like
yeah,
Billy Olstein or Joel Olstein or some shit like that. He's one of those televangelists. Makes tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. And is this huge gaudy ass fucking church is talking about how people need Jesus and condemning homosexuals and all this shit, which isn't even a tenet of Christianity. Like, whenever the Christians go out there and start bashing gay people, it's like, you clearly never read the Bible, right? How many times did your Lord and Savior Jesus bash gay people? 0. Fucking 0. It's not in there a single goddamn time, right? Like, at the Jews, okay, so you go Old Testament, which the whole reason that they're Christian and not Jewish is they're like, oh, well, Jesus came and basically all the fucked up things about Judaism he fixed. It's like, okay, so when he didn't bash the gays, you took that as he didn't do anything about the bashing of the gays in the Old Testament? Because, like, literally, it's the things like spilling the seed on the ground is worse than putting it in a hooker, right? These are the types of things that the Bible talks about, right? And I'm like, okay, I see the logical sense in that, right? Like, the purpose of sex is for reproduction. At least if you're ejaculating into a hooker, you will be making a bastard child out of wedlock, which is bad, but it's better than throwing your seed on the ground or on her face or whatever, right? So yeah, at least you're still going through the process that would potentially make a child, even if the other aspects of it are still a sin. That's still better, right? Like, a hierarchy exists of sin, and sodomy obviously is a sin in the Jewish religion, and it talks about it, but the whole Christian side of it doesn't, and yet they're the ones out there bashing the gay. Like, how many Jews do you see out there having bash the gay protests, right? Like, pray the gay away. Like, that's not a Jewish thing. They're not doing that, and they're the ones who actually have that in their side of the book. And so it's really easy to find plenty of corrupt people in Christianity that are figureheads of Christianity. Like, they're not like fringe. They're not like David Duke is to the Republican Party, where they're fringe, where the majority of people look at him like, oh, this fucking guy? No, this fucking guy's not with me. In Christianity, those David Duke fuckers who are out there like, pray the gay away, and they want to send like what they accused Mike Pence of, which isn't what Mike Pence actually said at all, of like they want to abduct gay children and take them to camps to brainwash the gay out of them, right? Not right. What Mike Pence wants. That's what he was accused of. That's not actually what he wants. It was literally if a homosexual felt that they were homosexual by fault and thought that electroshock therapy would fix their homosexuality, so completely voluntary action on her part, or his part, Mike Pence said that he would be okay with allowing them to do that. So it's like, oh my God, he said he would be okay if somebody voluntarily went to electroshock therapy because they thought being gay was wrong and they were gay, right? Whereas you have televangelists who are advocating sending your kids to gay camps where they're brainwashed or, borderline tortured against their will, so it would be torture, to get rid of the gay, right? That's very horrible, very horrific. Christianity blows. And that's one of the problems is, like, I'm sorry, I just remember, like, being a kid and, like, going to, like, the Christian church. And so sometimes, like, I remember dude, I was, like, 8 or 9. And I remember looking at the pastor's, like, brand new Cadillac. And I'm like, that is a nice car, right? And I was looking at it, I was like, oh, it's so nice. It's, like, just a wonderful fucking car. And I love the shit out of it. And I wish I had one, right? And go in the sermon, and then the pastor is passing around the collection plate, and he's talking about how the church needs money because we need to build a new steeple on top of the church because it was damaged last year in a storm, and it's starting to leak, and so everybody needs to give money, and their goal is $150,000. I'm like, this motherfucker's driving an $80,000 car, talking about he needs these poor motherfuckers to give him $150,000. What the fuck is that shit? Like, if it's so goddamn important to you, why are you driving a Cadillac? If this is a house of worship and you love God so much that you are anointed to lead the rest of us to God, how the fuck are you going to buy an $80,000 car and tell us we need to fix the goddamn church for you? And that was it, right? And that, you just keep seeing that kind of shit repeatedly over and over again, right? Like when you look at people like Harvey Weinstein, they're not even practicing Jews. Like, oh, he's got Jewish lineage. Like, he's not a practicing Jew, and even so, he's not a rabbi, right? Like the thing that they was in New York, they were talking about the rabbis were spreading herpes with the babies for sucking baby dicks on the circumcisions. Like, okay, all right, you have a clear, valid point that you are making there, but there's a thin line that you're on between it being pedophilia and them just being too stuck in archaic, backwards traditions, right? Like Jews having sex through a sheet on their wedding night, I think is like super weird. Okay? Yeah, that is a fucking thing. That's literally a thing. Right? People still do that today. And I'm like, that is a weird, archaic tradition. A rabbi has no reason to be sucking a baby dick today. Like, that's just not necessary. It's one of the things that cause like swelling to stop the swelling quicker to stop the blood flow, and you can ensure that you did a proper circumcision. It's like, yeah, a fucking 1,000 years ago, that was probably the best method. Not now. No, you just don't need to be doing that. And I get that. But to say that's on the same level as the Catholic priest sticking their dick in little boys' asses, I'm thinking the religious tradition of like an actual ceremony versus the rape of a boy might not be the same thing. Right? Let's put those in perspective. I agree both practices should stop. All right? But I think one is definitely worse than the other.
Fair enough.
But that's the same thing, like the Christianity and its corruption. Same thing you're seeing in the education system. The colleges are going to offer whatever easy, and they're making courses easier. Right? The courses are getting easier to go through, so that more kids get in and stay in. Right? They look at the dropout rate and are like, let's just make it easier. So you're not getting a quality education, but the price is still going up, the quality is going down, so they can retain more students, so they can make more money. Not so that you can be prepared for your future after school, but so they can keep more kids in school. They can keep their student enrollment numbers up, so they can continue to get that taxpayer money from the federal aid, from the financial aid. It's that simple. And if you look like, the classes are getting easier. As I say, if I'm passing classes that are classes for my major without ever even buying the textbook, let alone opening it and looking at it, and I'm passing the classes super easy. It's like, so the quality of the education that you're getting is going down, the price of the education is going up, and the colleges are getting rich off of it, and they don't care how it's affecting you. And so if you are the student, obviously it's targeted at like 16 to 20 year olds, you need to be looking at what that costs, and before you apply to college, you need to know what you're going to college for, know what the potential earnings are, and how much it's going to cost you to get that degree at whatever school it is you're thinking about going to. Because if you're picking a degree and the potential earning is $32,000 a year, and you're looking at $160,000 to get the degree, that's not a good idea. That's bad. You don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's I mean, the problem seems pretty obvious. I mean, the question is, you know, keeping in politicians in the DOE that are, well, not politicians, but people that are running the actual agency, that are going to try and actually roll that back. And then what do you do with all the debt that's there now? You know, that's the question.
Well, it's the same thing with Social Security, right? Like, I look at the Social Security system and I'm like, this clearly doesn't make financial sense. Right? There's no financial logic to it. And I think, like, anybody who's 35 and younger now should be informed you're going to keep paying into it. So no new people are going to pay into it, right? Or probably the next 5 years worth of people would be added into it, would have to pay into it, and know that we're not going to get anything out of it until it, and basically if you're, I'm sorry, did I say 35? 45. So 45 and younger, and then the next 5. So if you're in 8th grade now to if you're 45 now, you're going to keep paying into Social Security and you're not going to get the benefit, simply to pay off the obligation that the government has already had, because you have to keep your promises, right? You made that promise. So hey, you're 45, you can plan for your own future in retirement. Start doing that now because we're not doing it anymore, right? I think that's long enough that you can actually, assess your finances and plan for your future to be prepared for your retirement. And then also we need to put in high school with civics class, retirement education, right? That the debt that's already there for Social Security for the people who are already on it, we just have to accept that exists. And the reason I'm saying 45, like honestly, a 46-year-old, a 47-year-old, 48-year-old could probably still plan for it, but you gotta make the line somewhere, right? And you're less likely, like a 50-year-old is pretty close to retirement age. You think they're really going to save enough in 15 years for the next 30 years of life? That's kind of a tall ask. And when it comes to education, it's like these students who have this loan debt, who picked shitty fucking degrees and owe this money and they're having trouble finding work. Sorry. You did make the decision as a legal adult. You incurred that debt, right? It's not my obligation or responsibility. The most I can do is fix it for the people who are coming into it now to save them from ending up in the same position by giving them the information and the education to make better decisions and reforming the system to where you're only getting that financial aid, right? The long term is reforming to where the financial aid is only going to high economic earning positions so that it's channelizing people, right? So incentivize people to go into things that pay good money that's going to give them a better financial future rather than going into anything regardless of whether it has a future or not. Those fixes are what we can do to help the future generation, but like it's the same thing with welfare. It's like, well, the welfare system has a problem. Fix the welfare system. They're like, what about this welfare mom who's got 10 fucking kids that she can't support? Like, okay, well, she's fucked. But what about that 18-year-old who's being fed into this system, who's going to end up being the next one, who's going to be her 10 years from now? Right? I want to help her and fix her and deviate her from that path now before she ends up just being another one of those welfare. I can't do much for the fucking, the recovering drug addict with 10 illegitimate kids who's hookering herself on Craigslist while collecting welfare. I can't do much to change her fucking life. All right?
Well, the one thing I'm looking at that politically, right? Because
I'm not. Fuck that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because the problem being that you have to do this through policy. You have to do this through retaining the government and majorities, right? And in order to do that, because by presenting that message to the public, you're adding an entire block, a large block of, because there's a shit ton of people out there with a lot of students to the Democrat side.
Well, they're either already there, because like, how many conservatives do you know that are like sitting there, making protest signs and complaining about their student loan debt? Right. No, they're out there finding ways to solve their problems, right? Like that's part of the reason people are in the conservative party is that type of mentality. Now you do have the Christian conservative. I hate those people so goddamn much. Because they are literally the bludgeoning tool used by the left to classify all conservatives. They're like, look at these Christian conservatives and this stupid fucking God hates fag sign they're holding. That's all Republicans. Like, no, it's not. The majority of us don't even like these people. We literally have the log cabin Republican Party over here, which is literally nothing but gay dudes. That's the whole fucking caucus is nothing but gay dudes. Like that. No, they do not represent all of us. Right? Like, there's a black Republican caucus. There's a fucking gay Republican caucus. There's even feminists who are in the Republican Party that they are a super minority, but they do exist, right? And you're like, these Christian conservatives are the vocal retards, and because we're not an exclusionary group, it's like, well, you do buy into some of our values, but then you're out there saying God hates fags and Obama is a Muslim, and kind of an issue. Kind of an issue. We don't like Obama, and then every time we criticize him, they point to you and your stupid Obama's a secret Muslim bringing jihad to the United States, and then they use that to make us look stupid when we make a valid criticism of him. Like, I had to go through that shit for 8 fucking years. I'm sick of their shit. I want them all to just go away. I recommend Antarctica. Bring summer attire.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm wishing them death or ill will, but I want them to be gone. And you know what I'm talking, because you see the left, CNN, MSNBC, whenever there's like a protest, and there's like one fucking asshole or some Christian conservative gets out there with God hates fags. It's the only fucking person you see from the entire protest. 10,000 people showed up, and they show the one guy holding God hates fags sign, which everybody else has like legitimate grievances. And they're just like, oh, look at this one guy. There you go. There's the Republicans being Republicans again. God damn it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, well, that's that's unfortunately part of the game.
Well, no, you get what I'm saying, though, right? It's like, I point to the left, and I'm like, look at this entire protest of dyed-haired people hitting people with bike locks, chanting like, pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. It's like, you got like 1,000 people chanting that. But then when you have like a Republican rally for something, you got like one asshole doing one fucked up thing, and that's the only thing they show. It's like, but when I point to the left protest, actually is everybody there wearing vagina hats, right? Like looking fucking, screaming at the sky because Trump was elected. I'm like, literally 10,000 fucking people are out there doing that. Whereas the conservative rally, you got one asshole doing it and 10,000 people not doing it, and you only show me the one asshole and pretend the other 10,000 are doing the same thing. Right? Like,
yeah.
And they're like, it's the same. Oh, well, each side has their crazy. It's like, yeah, but we have one and you've got 1 million. It's like, and it's the same fucking guy at every protest with the same fucking sign. Like, I remember when Bush was elected, these motherfuckers were holding signs that Bush plus Israel equals Nazis. What? Or like what? I don't even understand. So, because Bush was elected and he's pro-Israel, that makes him a Nazi. Go ahead, you just figure that one out. Right? Or our fucking neocon is the new Nazi was another popular sign that I saw numerous times when Bush was elected. So like these protests, it's not even like a Trump thing. They were doing it when Bush was elected, right? Like when I was in high school, I was seeing this shit. Then Obama was elected, and every time the right did something that was like kind of sort of against him, they pointed to the one fucking whack job out there with his fucking 10-foot tall fucking cross and his God hates fag sign, and said that's all Republicans. This is why we can't reform Social Security, we can't reform welfare, we can't reform Medicaid, we can't reform the education system, which is also one of the reasons I supported Jeb. Jeb's public education fight in Florida fixed the education system there by and large, right? It obviously it still has problems. It's not perfect, but there's no perfect system in existence. Unless you talk to communists, apparently communism is perfect. And if we would just let them try it, they would get it right this time.
Yeah, I know. But that's the ongoing problem, right? Like this is the issue with social programs is as soon as you turn that water source on, right, it's extremely hard to get rid of it. People get used to it. You
can only turn it up, you can never turn it off.
Yeah, and that's the problem. To me,
well, all I want is one thing. I would like all the libertarians, every one of them in the nation, to sell off everything that they own, move to the state of Missouri, become the majority, vote all the libertarian politicians who literally just outlaw all that shit in the state. Right? They're like, welfare, gone. Just fucking gone. We're not doing it anymore. Done. Oh, teachers unions, gone. Yeah, we're not allowing that in the public sector. No public sector unions allowed anymore. Right? And then just give it 10 years. Did I cut out? You don't hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you now. Yeah.
I said, because here's the thing. Missouri,
create Libertopia.
Well, not necessarily, because they wouldn't be a super majority to do all the crazy things, but they would be enough to do something like banning public sector unions, getting rid of the welfare system, right? And here's the thing is, if they just did that, and you give it like 10 years of that being gone, everyone would see how much better a landlocked state that is not a great economic powerhouse, right? Like, there's nothing particularly great about the state, right? That's why I didn't pick Illinois or Texas or something like that. One, it would give them enough of a population to have a large enough vote, and two, once they implemented those things, you would see a drastic change in the state. Like if all the libertarians moved to California, they still wouldn't get the vote, right? If they went to New York, they wouldn't get the vote. Illinois, they probably still wouldn't get the vote. Missouri, they could.
See, that's the funny thing about this whole debate, right? Is that the nature of the left wing in our political system has always been it's essentially been there to look out for people who fall through the cracks, right? And
no, it isn't.
Well, that's that's traditionally anyway the purpose.
No, that's the narrative. That's not what they're doing.
Well, that's the problem in our system is that they've convinced a whole bunch of people, right, that they have fallen through the cracks. Not the truth. That what's happened to them is that they've fallen prey to a runaway, it's just basically a runaway social program system.
Am I going to have to go through the history of the left in the United States again?
No, as far as the Democrat Party goes?
Yeah, they were literally the foundational ideology for Adolf Hitler. Again, literally, he looked at the American Democrats and said, they've got the right idea. Now let's just add gas chambers. So this whole, they want to help the people falling through the cracks. Margaret Sanger was going to KKK rallies saying support abortion because we're gonna fucking sterilize the black people.
Yeah, it's tradition. Well, that's
She's
yeah.
still
so
celebrated today. She literally wanted to genocide black people, and she's still a hero.
Right. That's fair. Fair enough. Right. But that's supposed to be the purpose of a left country. Supposed to be.
Well, no, you're confusing European left and American left. And I actually think the European left, in some instances, had some validity to it, right? Like Hitler's like, I want to build an ethno-state. Where do we go to for ideas? And the only place that there was the United States, particularly the Democrat-run south of the United States, right? There were rules that Democrats put in place in the United States that even the Nazis said were too extreme and did not implement.
Well, see, here's the funny thing, right? There are people who are registered Democrats that I know that I don't find ridiculous. They're probably closer to what you might consider like a blue dog Democrat or within that particular party. A very small percentage of the overall party now. But these are the types of people who would be looking out for workers' rights and things like that.
Commies.
We can make arguments against that as well because there's a lot of stuff that I don't agree with in there. But people who probably be more concerned with like the 40-hour work week or restrictions on particular type of labor if it causes too much of a risk to a person or compensation.
Fuck that. All right.
Yeah. This is the thing.
Hold on. If they're like, you've got like a 1 in 2 chance of dying doing this job, and I take that fucking job because the pay's right. That's on me.
Yeah.
I don't want some third party coming saying, no, you can't do that job. Go fuck yourself. Get the fuck out of my life, cocksucker.
I'm just saying. These are the Democrats that I can understand why they exist. That's the thing. Like,
here's the big thing: is not when I say Democrats, I'm talking more of the political side of it. Those people more fall in the category of the useful idiots. They're like, I'm voting for them because they have a D. They must agree with what I'd agree with. It's like, yeah, but you never took the time to actually look at the things that they agree with. Right, you just assume because you're in the same party that your views are their views, and that's not like the Republican Party has lots of different camps, and I realize there are lots of different views, and not every politician agrees with me. The Democrats think they're like the fucking Borg, and they all need to be of one mind.
Well, see, that's the funny thing about it, though, is that the Republican Party, as varied as it is, and all of the different factions in it, there is still an underlying current principles that are held to. For the most part, there are exceptions to that rule, obviously, but the main critique that I hear out of Democrats that are of this mindset, is that with the Democrat Party, right? They don't have principles anymore. They don't have what they have are objectives. They have things that they have decided that they want to accomplish. They don't care.
Like
they
bringing
don't
back
care.
segregation?
They don't. Well, I'm sure. They don't care.
They literally are advocating. Like Harvard is having an all blacks only graduation, and they're advocating for all public schools to have black-only spaces. Like, we did that before, and it was considered illegal. So you're like, well, if we replace the word white with black, maybe the Republicans will let us get away with it this time. No, we're on to you, you motherfuckers.
Well, that's the thing, though. Is that's the main critique that they have, though. Democrats, they don't actually stand for anything, and it's true. The Republican Party will stand on principle, and usually to its own detriment, because right now, the Democrats are essentially playing a game of pure power politics. It's just win. That's all they care about. Retain power and win. They don't have.
That's exactly why we got Trump.
Exactly.
Right? They're like, here comes a guy who's going to do the backhanded insults, except he doesn't know how to do backhanded insults, so they're just straight insults. Because he's like, the Democrats are flinging insults at people all the time. Like, what, racist Mitt, I can't remember what it was, but they, like, the attacks on him were, like, throwing shade on him in a way that, like, not a dog whistle, but it wasn't, like, an overt, just blatant insult like Trump does. So that's the Democrats have been doing that for decades, and now a guy with an R next to his name is like, oh, I could do that too. Rosie O'Donnell's a fat cow. Fuck Rosie O'Donnell. Hillary, you're going to jail. And they're like, oh my God, what is he doing? Right? And he's like, he's doing the same thing the Democrats do. He's just not doing it tactfully because he doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
It's like he's using your own bag of tricks against you, and you have no idea what to do because, like Mitt Romney. Okay, you know who Mitt Romney's dad is?
Nope.
Well, you work in the banks. I thought maybe you'd know. So he worked under Nixon, right? And he is the one that went out to the banks and basically illegally threatened them with things if they didn't stop the redlining practice against black people, right? So you know how like black communities were red line, and then mixed race was yellow line, and then green was like whites only, and that was an actual policy that was implemented by the federal government. It was put in place on banks by FDR. Nixon was like, yeah, we're going to stop doing that, and a lot of the banks are kind of like, this has been our general practice for like decades. Was it 30 to 70? So, you know, quite a while they've been doing that. And George Romney, who's Mitt Romney's dad, went to like the heads of the banks. Were like, if you don't stop doing this, I will falsify information against you, and we will investigate you with the FBI. You will go to jail. I don't care if I have to make the shit up. You will stop doing this redlining, or you're going down. So right, like your dad literally went toe to toe against major banks in this country to get them to stop racist practices, right? Never once brought that up. And I was like, that's kind of a good tool to use against somebody who's calling you a racist. You're like, literally my dad was willing to break the law and go to jail to stop racism in the United States. No? That doesn't need to be brought up, apparently. No. You know what I mean? Like, that was one of the things that actually made me like Mitt, and I found that out on my own. That was never publicized.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing. Like, even I'm watching the ads right now for the Senate race here, and so we got the Democrats Sinema going up against Martha McSally, and all of the ads that I've heard from Sinema's camp are just going on and on and on about healthcare and Trump and the Republicans. And her main pitch seems to be, well, you know, we can't afford our health care. I don't think we can afford Martha McSally. And I find it to be such a weird pitch because just because of what we've seen with you know, the Affordable Health Care Act, what's actually happened out of that. Well, we were functionally...
That's another thing. The Republicans have done a shit job of getting that word out.
Yeah.
They're just not... And it's like, Democrats create policies. The policies completely blow up and make things worse, and then the Republicans just sit on their hands. And it's like, yeah, you are where you're at war, right? You might want to take a shot. Just one, maybe. Fuck.
Yeah, and so that's the problem too. Is that yeah, that's where I see. I think that's where I see our political system going now. Is it's going to become really just a game of power politics on either side.
Well,
I
it's
mean,
not
that's
only that. Like, the Republicans have legitimate grievances against Democrat policies, actual evidence that's out there, and it's not. You know, you can't put it in the soundbite for your ad campaign. Like, this needs to be a sustained campaign of explaining these things to constituents, right? Like, it's not going to be in your 30-second commercial. You need to be putting it out there constantly, right? Sending pamphlets out explaining what the detriment was of Obamacare to the constituents. So when they're looking at things, right, and they're like, oh, well, my life did get worse, but I don't really know why. Like, life is just worse in general. A Republican who's looking to run in that area should be sending out pamphlets to everybody who's going to be voting, right? And it doesn't matter if they're left or right, because there might be Democrats who are like, oh, Obamacare's fixing everything, and their life's getting steadily worse from the fucking Obama policies. And then you spell it out in a pamphlet, and you got like web URLs in there to fucking research papers, you know, evidence to back it up, and they're like, well, shit. Apparently it turns out that this is what's fucking up my life, because that's going to override the emotional let's help the poor people with the Affordable Care Act. Oh no, the poor people with the pre-existing conditions. It's like, yeah, well, you know how you're making about like $6,000 less a year or $10,000 less a year? This is why. And like, oh, so it's actually hurting me. People care a lot more about what's hurting them than helping other people, especially in the Democrat camp. So I get to and that's a much better campaign run, to be a sustained campaign throughout, like especially the what do they call them, purple states, right? The mixed states. Like, that should definitely be a thing that's going on all day, every day, right? Like, you should just be hitting these things up like every year, or every 6 months even. Every constituent should be getting a pamphlet explaining how the Democrats are fucking their lives up, because they are. Right? You're gonna get a lot more voters who are interested in you and your policy, and when they see your campaign ad, they're like, "This is the guy who's been sending me this information as to why my life is fucked up and offering solutions to it." And then you got your 30-second ad, and it could be you shooting a machine gun and stuff, blow it up, and saying, "Vote for me." It wouldn't fucking matter, right? You already got the information out there. Yeah. Accurate information.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's yeah, I mean, I guess we'll just have to see what happens.
Well, they don't do it. They haven't been. Like, here's the thing: is Democrat policies have never been good. Like seriously, like name one time, like name one era where you're like, the Democrats, they were doing good shit. Like, was it when they took guns and voting rights away from black people? Was it when they owned black people as slaves? What was it when they created the redlining system and appointed high members of the KKK to cabinet positions and the goddamn Supreme Court? Was it when they were attacking black people with fire hoses and dogs and voting against giving them equal protection under the law? When exactly was it the Democrats were doing a good job?
Yeah, fair enough.
It's you know what I mean? It's like I could pull up ad campaigns that Democrats were running against Republicans, in which the entire ad campaign consists of a black person with the super big lips and the red cheeks, the caricature of a black guy, and they're like, "This is the face of the Republican Party. Vote white." Like, that's the Democrats' ad.
They used to say the Republican Party was the party of the Negro. That was one of their ad campaigns. Yeah, I remember that.
Right, and I'm saying, so it's like, what exactly is it that the Democrats are doing good for this country? Like, as in an era, like, not like, oh, JFK signed the Civil Rights Act. It's like, yeah, the Republican Congress are the ones who voted for that. The majority of the Democrats in Congress voted against that, and that one Democrat signed it into office. Like, so there was one Democrat who, also did a bunch of, like, super shady illegal shit while he was president, as well as having multiple affairs on his wife. Possibly also raped a woman, whose brother murdered a woman. I mean, there are plenty of things bad that he did, but he signed that one document that one time, therefore the whole party's forgiven. It's like, is he fucking Jesus? Was he crucified? Right? I mean, they're like, oh no, JFK signed the Civil Rights Act, so that totally forgives the creation of segregated unions in the North by Democrats, the literal segregation laws in the South by Democrats, the appointing of KKK members, poll taxes, like all this fucked up shit that they've done against minorities, and they're like, he signed the Civil Rights Act, that one guy, so it's all cool. It's like Bill Clinton, right? Bill Clinton, his literal hero, or his literal, what do you call it? He was his protege, his fucking mentor, right? That he eulogized was a recruiter for the KKK. He eulogized the guy and praised his name. And this was, after he left office, this guy died in the early 2000s. Bill Clinton eulogized a recruiter for the KKK, so did Hillary Clinton, about how great he was and how influential he was in Bill Clinton's political career. Right? So it's not like I'm talking about ancient fucking history. Hillary Clinton was just running for president, and she was talking about how influential a recruiter for the KKK was on her. But I'm fucking crazy. It's a conspiracy.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, it's I'm not a fan of the idea of having like a one party system. Obviously, like, there has to be an answer to the Republican Party, and I'm interested to see what the Democrats actually do reform into, because that's the process they're in right now.
They're going communism.
I know. If they go socialist, though, they're gonna flop. That's not a solution.
Yeah.
That's not...
This reminds me. So I was considering doing the next stream on why we need to fight the war on terrorism, and I'm going to use communism as an example of how we basically ended the war against communism, and that was very akin to the war on terror. Like, we were fighting an ideology, because people were like, we've never done this kind of thing before. It's like the literal entire Cold War was literally this type of thing, right? Like, we were fighting the ideology of communism and the spread of communism around the world. Like, that's literally what we were doing. So the war on terror is the same thing against Islamic extremism instead of communism. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, we gave up on communism as fighting the war, and now it's back in a rebuilding phase. But we gave up on fighting Islamic extremism before it ever even got to the collapse phase like the Soviet Union did, right? Because that was a huge blow to communism. Communism kind of went belly up for a while, right? It didn't die, but it was definitely in a sickly stage. And so now, especially as Republicans, conservatives, or people who don't want to die in horrible, horrific ways, we're now going to have to contend with the rising of communism all across Europe, like it was doing in the 19-teens, right? Like when the actual communist revolution went on. The same type of rhetoric is happening in Europe right now. It's happening in the United States right now, which is new for the United States, because communism tried to get a revolution going here, and even during Prohibition and fucking gangsters mowing people down with Tommy guns in the streets, they still couldn't get the Americans to buy into it. And now we have literal elected officials advocating for it, so it's coming back in a much stronger way than it was 100 years ago. And we still have radical Islamic terrorism at a very powerful level throughout the world, and we're going to be caught right in the middle of both of them.
So what you're saying is we should go and invade Germany and just take care of the socialists and the Islamists.
Oh yeah. Okay, so honestly, and everybody is totally against this. I was 100% on board for this. And I mean, I literally could not find a single person to agree with me other than my interpreter in Iraq. He was literally he's like, hell yeah, and if not, can you put me in your sea bag and just take me to America and get me the fuck out of this shithole? But I was like, we should take Iraq, make a deal with the Iraqi government, and at least from the Al-Anbar province up in the whole northern Kurdish area, make it a U.S. territory. Right, building in the infrastructure, moving the 4th Marine Division from Okinawa into Iraq, into northern Iraq, and literally setting up a superstructure, military infrastructure there, making it a U.S. territory, just like we did in Germany and Japan at the end of World War II, and just staking our claim, be like, we're here to fucking stay, motherfuckers. Go ahead and try another 9/11. We will level your entire goddamn country. We're here now. Stars and stripes, bitch. Right, and now in the deal, all of the oil would be piped to Iraq, right? So it's still like Iraq would keep the mineral rights to the oil that's up there, right? Because obviously the big problem with that would be, oh, you're only doing that for the oil. Like, no, I don't care about the oil. I care about killing the brownies. They can have the oil.
Shit, dude.
No, but seriously, think about it. Like, if we did that, one, it'd be very dangerous. But hey, it's already dangerous to be Israel. So if anything, it would make it easier on Israel. There was another plan that I had that was really, really, like, people were like, you should probably get help. And I was like, we don't need to declare war. We can just go to Israel on a training mission and just send like an entire Marine division and then push through all of Palestine. Just take it all out. Right? I mean, like, okay, so like the women and children, you process them through, like, not slaughtering everybody. And then any guy that wants to stand and fight, you shoot him in his dick and then shoot him in his face. Right? And then that's it. No more Palestinian problem. And the entire rest of the Middle East is gonna imagine like if you were Iran, right? And you're talking about, oh, we need to annihilate all the Jews, and then all of a sudden a division of Marines just wiped out Palestine. Like the whole fucking PLO doesn't even exist anymore, right? They're just gone. It was like, what was that, Iran? We didn't hear you. We're done over here. You want some attention too, motherfucker? Right? It'd be fucking dead silent, right? Like, you would have like the people like, oh, it was so horrible in Europe, but all the Muslim countries would be like, I'm afraid to say anything. Like, what if they turn that crazy shit towards us? Like, I don't know, right? Like in Iraq, we did it to Fallujah, and the entire Al-Anbar province got real quiet real quick for a while. Right, we ended up letting up on them too much, and then they started popping off again. But after the push through Fallujah, everybody was like, "Fuck, I ain't doing shit." They're like, nope.
Oh, I don't. You know what? As far as Europe goes, I don't think that they would. I mean, they'd bitch. But that's all they do.
The UN was complaining that Israel, after dropping leaflets, sending a televised message and a cell phone message, right? An audio and a text message, right? So technically 4 different messages they sent to this location that we were bombing this one place, right? They're like, we're going to bomb this building. 4 messages, and it was like 8 hours prior, I think. They went and bombed the building, and like 2 people died. The UN's like, human rights violation. It's like, we literally gave them 8 hours warning. If they didn't leave, like, what the fuck do you want from us? Like, we got to walk into the fucking building and escort them out ourselves before we blow it up. It's a literal fucking Hamas stronghold. They were trying to evacuate the weapons, and some people got caught in there and died. Like, straight up fucking terrorists, right? You know, the members of Hamas moving their weapons, which were rockets they were shooting from the rooftop, into Israel, right? The reason Israel gives the messages is so you can leave, you have to abandon the heavy equipment because you don't have enough time to move everything out. So they still get to destroy a lot of your equipment, like the big stuff. They won't get your AKs and your RPGs, but they'll get your fucking, you know, your rocket launching tubes and shit.
Right.
Which is a lot nicer than I would be if I was Israel. I'll tell you that right now. I would send it out like 30 seconds prior and then be like, it's going to be one of these 10 locations, and then bomb all 10 of them. They're like, oh shit,
yeah,
you know?
So
they're like trying to run out of the building as I blow it up.
I always think about the situation in Israel, and I try to like compare it to if it was the U.S. So let's say like Mexico was like firing rockets across the border into like civilized areas in like Arizona, Texas.
Yeah, like If they
do
were
you
doing
know
that to
how
San Diego's a little bit smaller than the Tel Aviv, and they're constantly launching rockets in there, so that would be about the equivalent.
Yeah, I know.
There'd be no Mexico.
I know. You just think about that for a second. You know how fast. Like, yeah, maybe
the first time we'd be like, "What the fuck happened?" And they'd be like, "Oh, it wasn't us. We don't know what happened. Evil oppressors."
Yeah, you could
all
make.
Right. And then they do it again, like, "Nope, that's it. Game over."
Yeah, you could make the argument too. It's just like, well, that wasn't the people. That was the cartels. They were like fucking with some other people. Blah blah. Like, if it kept up for like years.
If it happened fucking twice, it would be game over. I'm telling you right now, you are not going to shoot rockets into a civilian city twice and get away with it. All right, we learned this lesson.
Yeah, because here's what would, even if the U.S. military didn't get involved, I guarantee you, there would be some pretty there are entire groups of guys down in Arizona that just are waiting for like any excuse. Militias, like private militias and shit.
Yeah.
Dude, I guarantee you.
Hey, some of them have a bad rap. There are plenty of bad ones, but there are some good ones that are legitimately out there, and they they detain the illegals and like give them water and treat them humanely and call it border patrol, and they're literally just trying to protect the border. And then you got the crazy rednecks who are like, "Oh, I'm gonna shoot at that beaner over there."
Yeah,
like militia has a like cult and militia both are terms that are like gather like a really bad rap because you only hear about the bad ones.
Yeah.
But like,
well, I'll be honest,
any private church like the Amish are a cult, right? And
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if you've ever heard somebody utter the phrase, "I shot a series of warning shots over their head." Like, series, just a warning shot, series. But yeah, no, it's I just look at that situation and I find the whole situation really funny because it's like if it was any other country, try doing that kind of shit to Russia. I mean, you saw what they did to. Yeah, I mean, you saw how they dealt with the Muslims, right? I mean, that was like people raised a lot of fucking questions about that, but I mean, it's what happens. Like, if you fuck with a major country, you know, you're gonna get fucked back. I mean, we had 2 towers knocked down in this country, and we invaded an entire country over it. You know, and to me, it's just like we're sitting here like fucking piling troops into like 2 different nations because of an attack, and then you're looking at Israel and be like, but just stop picking on those poor Palestinians.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm like, I'm 100. I was 100% with Israel forever. All right, like, all right. So let's look at this. Like, say, like because you have like the Holocaust folks who are like, oh, the Holocaust was nothing as bad as the Jews say. They're just pushing this narrative for victim points. I'm like, all right, let's say the Holocaust was only a quarter as bad as what the popular narrative is. That still justifies them having their country and doing whatever the fuck they want to people shooting rockets at them. All right, I'm going to say free pass for fucking life. All right. You know, they got their own little slither of land. They're doing something with it. You're fucking with them. They massacre your people. That I don't care. Sorry, and I don't get that applies to the Kurds too, right? Like people were talking about how bad some of the shit the Kurds were doing in Syria was. Look, I don't care. They rate it. They were fucking like experimented on by Saddam Hussein, who fancied himself a mini Hitler, right? They get a free pass. They want because the Assad regime and the Saddam regime were both Ba'ath Party, which were puppets of the Soviet Union, right? Like they're all in the same group. Like, so if anybody who's in there supporting the Saddam regime, they're supporting the Ba'ath Party, they're supporting communists. We know how many people they killed. And it's the same fucking political party of Saddam Hussein, who was the one that was fucking torturing them with gas, like gassing their villages just to see what the gas would do to the kids. Like, yeah, if they're gonna treat you badly, more power to them. I don't give a fuck. you fuck with you fuck with a bull, you get the horns. I don't care.
Yeah.
Fuck your Human Rights Council.
Oh, and you know, it's funny. Nobody like raised any eyebrows about Gaddafi either. That was a funny thing. Like, just the way he was killed, right? For the whole world to see too, mind you.
He went Mussolini style. It was great.
Yeah, you know, like, if you want to talk about, you know, the humanity of people, right? I mean, everybody.
I think the way that Gaddafi was treated, you know, that was like, all right, then the country's forgiven. The way that Mussolini was treated is like, all right, the country's forgiven. Hitler though, Hitler did not get that treatment. The Nazis in general did not get that treatment in Germany, and so you were not forgiven. You carry the sins of your father. You guys just totally acted like nothing happened. Like, no big deal, guys. No big deal. It's like, at least in these other places, when the time came, they raped them with bayonets. All right.
Yeah.
Like, they made examples of people. Like, who ran the Nuremberg trials? It wasn't fucking Germany.
Right. Well,
like,
yeah, I don't know.
Guys, can we just call it even? You won the war. It's like, no, these motherfuckers were mass murdering people. Somebody's got to answer for this. Fuck Germany.
Yeah, this is the problem with like Europe itself. It's this like arrogance that they have. You know, it's this snootiness. It's like they look at other parts of the world and they say, "Why do people act like that? I don't understand." Like, you know, look at your own history for a minute. Like,
right? Yeah.
So
yeah, I love when they're like, "We're gonna criticize the U.S." Like, literally, I could throw a dart at any European country, and you've done worse. Any of you. There's not a fucking one of you. Like, okay, some of you I have to go pretty far back in history, like fucking was it Sweden and Norway. It's like, you motherfuckers used to go out on boats, slaughter entire villages, kidnap the women, and rape them to death. All right, let's not fucking play games here.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, they also it's almost like they come from it's a very like their systems. A lot of the reason that they're able to run a lot of the tax heavy systems that they've got is because they don't have to worry about
personal
military costs. They don't. Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. We have an entire Euro command where like a huge chunk of our military apparatus is stationed in Europe to defend Europe. From what? I don't know, because the Soviet Union's fucking gone. Like, so who are we defending them from? Because we're not stopping the Muzzies, right? The Muslims are sure as fuck all over the place.
Yeah, this is why
So it's like, we're literally there, we're fighting a war on terror, and we're not doing anything about the terror in Europe, so we're kind of just a huge waste of money.
Yeah, I you know, the other thing, too, I find really funny about it, it's like, you know, the Europeans that push socialism in the U.S., it's like, okay, let's say you get that off the ground. Who's going to pay for all your shit?
Like, no, you remember Trump talking about, like, reducing the funds to NATO and the military presence in Europe, and they were all in a fit about it. And it's like, motherfucker, last week you were telling us we need to spend more money on our social program, and we have a bloated military-industrial complex, and we're like imperialistic warmongers, and then we're like, we're going to reduce our military spending in Europe, and you're like, no, don't do that, don't do that, whoa, don't be so hasty. How the like last week you were telling us to do it, then we say we're going to do it, and you're like, no, how dare you threaten us with that? Like, well,
yeah, it's like in the last since the 40s, it's like you've got an entire population of people that just don't understand consequences. It's amazing. I'm just looking at all the stuff that the EU is doing, and none of them seem to see any problem with this. Like, you're literally delegating your sovereignty, your powers to a foreign body that has absolutely no reason to listen to you, and you're completely fine with it.
Well, like, yeah, the majority of them are cool with it, and it's weird.
Yeah, just like how little protest there is about it. It's just like, how comfortable must you be in a society to not worry about...
I told you my NATO plan, didn't
I?
No. remove all of the military apparatus from Germany. So, like, we actually rent, like, large swaths of land from Germany to keep our military there that defends them. But we have to pay them to defend them. Consider the irony of that. And we just take this whole apparatus and move it to Poland. And they're like, why? Well, you let in all these Syrian refugees. You got these Muslim terrorists and Muslim rape gangs, and we're fighting a war on terror, and you kind of undermine that by letting our enemies flee here to kill you. And Poland isn't. So we're moving to Poland. Fuck you, Germany. Right? Because here's the thing. One, if Trump announced that now is the time to do that, because Putin would be on board with it. It's the rare instance where you would actually have Putin being like, okay, right? Because any other time you moved your entire military apparatus closer to the Russian border, it would be a problem. But the entire American political system, half the American political system is accusing him of being a Russian puppet. So if he moves the stuff to be closer to Russia, they're like, oh, proof, and then it's actually beneficial to Putin to let him do that. Right? And if we did that, it would actually be better for Poland in a lot of ways. it would really shake up Europe and make them question the EU, or Germany would, or Brussels, sorry, would raise their military for the EU to fill the vacuum, and then we'd have somebody to kill. I mean, shit. I'll let the cat out of the bag. We know the Germans are going to do it again. We might as well get this World War III started.
Yeah, well, I mean, it almost seems like if the...
Strike 3, no more Germany. Germany, you're out. That's all I'm saying. when you start it, no, there will be no more Germany.
It almost seems like that's the way it's going to go, you know, because either the EU collapses or the EU gains a stronghold, and then they've got the Visegrad group they're going to have to fucking deal with. And if any of those nations at any point, like Italy, for example, just decide, look, this isn't working for us anymore, there's going to become a point in time where the economy drops to such a low that people are going to be in the streets pissed off and fucking angry. Like, say, in Italy, for example.
Yeah.
Demanding that their government do something. They're going to put some... I mean, it's already happening. If you look at the parties in Europe, the far... Like, not... Well, I say far right. That's been drilled into my head by the media. But the more nationalist parties that are coming up.
The slightly left of center?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, like Marine Le Pen, I was like, yeah, that's the candidate for France. Now, here's the thing: when I actually look at her political if she was running in the United States, I'm like, she's way too far left for me. And I'm like, but I'm looking at France, I'm like, that's probably as far right as you're gonna be able to get over there.
Well, yeah, and so my whole feeling on this is that eventually, if the EU doesn't, crumble, if it maintains a stronghold for a long enough period of time, eventually there's going to be conflict, and that conflict is going to become violent at some point. Because if you can't, I mean, if you're delegating your powers away to a foreign body and you have no control, and then that foreign body starts to demand things of your country that your country simply cannot provide, and the people get angry and elect somebody who's going to be like, you know what, fuck the EU, we're just going to fucking leave. And then the EU starts blocking trade or does...
Well, no, the EU has been trying to raise an army. I keep telling people, the documents are out there, and they're acting like I'm some crazy conspiracy theorist. No, they're having public votes on the shit. It just hasn't passed. And here's the thing: is the creation of the EU, that wasn't the first iteration either, right? The original EU had way more consolidated power and basically eliminated all of the federal governments of the countries that are in the EU. Right, so they there wouldn't be a Queen of England anymore. There wouldn't be a Prime Minister in England anymore. It would only be the EU government, and that's why the countries didn't ratify it, because literally these elected officials would be like, I literally would be signing myself out of a job. So that's the only reason it didn't pass, is because the people who would have had to ratify it in the countries would have literally been resigning from their own jobs in order to do it. And so the EU that we have now, that's what they're working towards, right? That was originally what they wanted. Obviously, if that's what they wanted, that's where they're trying to go back to. And they're slowly working their way there. And when they have an EU military that's only answerable to the EU governmental body and has the right to enter any of those sovereign countries within the EU without their permission, you kind of have no more power left. You're nothing anymore, right? You have less power than any of the states in the United States at that point. Once that passes, you have less authority than any of the states in the United States. As a country, as a sovereign nation, there are states within a country that have more power than you do. Right? Because if the president tried to send the military into a state, multiple states could rally together their national guards, or that one state if he was standing alone. Right? It's a violation. He could be impeached by Congress for doing it. But not only that, but the states could raise up their national guards to fight them. It's just not something that can be done in the United States, right? We have actual laws against that. In the EU's military thing, the EU military would have the right to enter any sovereign country for any reason without permission. That's fucking terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I'm not I'm not confident about the EU, and it's really funny too. If you go and look at any of the betting sites out there in regards to the EU and politics, the only thing that they're betting on right now is which country is going to leave next. So it's kind of telling to see what it's just so funny to me. It's just like they have a way. I don't know what it is about Europeans, but they have this way of just this high-minded snobbery, while endeavoring to create huge boondoggles. You can see that. I mean, you can see that in obviously in World War II Germany.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
that's why I said that my plan for Trump, what his trade should be, is be like, we're not going to trade with the EU anymore. All of our trade will go through Britain, right? So, yeah, EU, you need to work on your trade deal with Britain, because if you want American goods, that's where they're going to go through. And then be
that's
like,
probably
hey, Italy, if you leave, we'll give you the same deal. Half of it'll go through Britain and half of it'll go through Italy, but we're not going to send anything to any EU country.
that's probably. I mean, that's probably what's going to happen, because right now, what it seems like to me that Trump's plan is, what it looks like to me anyway, is his goal is to undermine Chinese markets as much as possible. That's why this whole tariff thing's going on. I don't think he's trying to negotiate some better deal with China. He's just trying to fuck China in dirt. You undermine their steel market, right?
Yeah.
Then you've got the ability to start trading again steel. I think he really wants to reopen manufacturing in the U.S. He said as much anyway. And then you've also got this whole situation with Russia and oil, right? Look at our oil production. Right? We produce right now anyway, we're producing more than any other country out there.
Yeah.
Because of shale. And I think the general idea is just to completely undermine OPEC, right?
Which is good. Something
Right.
that Bush should have been working on.
Yeah, but by undermining OPEC, by fucking over the Saudis and by fucking over Russia, you then are putting the European Union in a position where it's not going to be feasible, or less feasible anyway, for them to be trading with Russia for energy. And they're, right now Germany specifically, and a lot of Europe is very dependent on that Russian oil. But you undermine that, and guess what? That's a booming market, another booming market for the U.S. You can manage to fuck over the Russians and the Chinese at the same time, undermine their markets, and put the Europeans basically in a position where they're going to have to trade with them. I think that's his
the other
overall
thing.
goal.
They're all made themselves dependent on Russia, while at the same time running this narrative of how evil Russia is, and they need the U.S. to protect them from Russia. Like, then why are you giving them billions of dollars every month?
Yeah, it's so funny that like you're literally
so
propping
scary,
up.
why are you funding them?
Yeah, like Merkel's literally propping up like 80 or 85%. I think it's probably closer to 80%. Russia's exports are all Gazprom. It's all their crude oil and refined petroleum that they're exporting to Europe. You cut that off, the country's crippled. They're done. Like that's literally it for them. And so and this is why I don't find Russia terrifying at all. Like, they're not. What are they gonna do? Like, literally, what are they? They've got their Satan missiles or whatever, their Satan nuclear bombs or whatever. But literally, if they started trying to deploy those, they'd be fucked anyway. They're not going to use that other than in a mutually assured destruction sort of situation.
Right.
And it wouldn't behoove anybody to decimate Russia in the fucking first place. But that's just point in fact, though, that they are not a threat. The only concern that we probably have with them is the oil production. But yeah, it's so funny to me when people bring up this Russia is some huge malactor that we need to all be worried about. It's completely ridiculous. You want one country to be worried about, it's fucking China. China's where you should probably be most concerned.
I picked Germany. Those
Pick
damn
what?
Germans. Germany.
The EU. It's our biggest obstacle.
German. Well, I think the EU is secretly just The Fourth Reich.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's puppeted by Merkel.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's all backed by the German banks now, and with the fucking Brits going to be gone here pretty soon. March
Well,
is
that's
when
the
they're
thing. The majority of Europe is being propped by the German banks. They've been using their banking system to accrue, power and influence over the rest of Europe. Like, oh, so we're actually already in World War III. They're already conquering Europe, and nobody noticed.
yeah.
Right. Well, look at the because who used to be the banking magnet of Europe?
Well, Britain.
Britain.
The UK.
Who is it now?
Well, I mean, if you're looking at the IMF, where is the IMF headed out of?
London, I
I don't
believe.
even know. Is it?
I think so.
International Tour.
DC. 189 countries. Okay. I only care about Europe.
Parent Organization, United Nations.
Yeah.
Well, what am I thinking of then? European banks?
I think we're both thinking of the same thing, but I can't think of the name.
Yeah, there's I don't know why I'm blanking on it right now. The European fuck's sake. Yeah, I
The
can't.
Banking Federation?
Well, no, there's the. Damn it. I should know this.
You would think.
Yeah, I would think. So the European Banking Authority, and then there's the European Central Bank. That's the bank that backs the euro, and that has the 19 EU member states. So that's what it is. The ECB is out of fucking.
HSBC is the largest bank in Britain, or the United Kingdom, as it were. 1 trillion
Headquartered,
900
yeah, it's the ECB. Yeah, okay, I'm not retarded. It's the ECB. The ECB is based out of Frankfurt, Germany. That's the European bank. That the ones that euro.
What is their asset value?
What's their reserves, or what do you mean?
Their reserves is $500 billion, but what is their asset value?
Good question.
Because it shows their reserves, but it doesn't show because like what a bank has versus what a bank is worth are not the same thing. And I can't find.
I don't know.
But I'm either way. I think they're. I hate how the British do this. So it says 1,936 billion pounds, but I don't remember because they use the comma as a decimal point or something like that. So is that 1.9 billion or is that 1,900 billion and they're just retarded? You know what I mean? Like.
I'm not a Eurofag.
It's got to be 1 trillion. Instead of saying 1 trillion, they're like 1,900 billion. Like you fucking idiots. There's a word. There's a word for that. Just throwing that out there. Because the Lloyd Bank is 817 billion, right? In their asset value, which makes them the second largest bank. Which means obviously it's got to be 1 trillion for the HSBC holdings. That's why I was trying to figure out what it was for the European Central Bank. I'd imagine it's got to be pretty high up there. But
well, I mean, if they're funding the entire euro, yeah.
Right. Like.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. To be honest, I've never looked at that. La, 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 la.
Well, because like as I said, it's the German banks that are backing this whole thing.
Yeah.
Here we go. What is this? In millions, so 5 trillion.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So the largest British bank is at 1 trillion, and the German bank is at 5 trillion. So yeah, they're definitely eclipsing them now.
Oh yeah, sure, but that's a big chunk.
Well, what I was saying is yeah, 1 trillion is nothing to shake a stick at, but 5 trillion when that bank.
I would imagine
the HSBC used to be like the largest bank in the world.
Yeah, I would imagine that has something to do with their little divorce bill. They're trying to get the Brits to pay.
Well, that's for getting the Brits to cover like one year's worth of value of what they put into the EU, because there is no other country that can foot the bill. All right, like Germany was the main payer, then Britain, then France, right? And so like France is like, well, we can't pay more, and we're definitely not going to be able to cover that share. And then look at Italy, look at Greece, right? Look at Poland, right? Who the fuck's going to pick up that tab, right? Like, you think Switzerland's just sitting on trillions of dollars they haven't told anybody about? They got nowhere else to go for the money. Right?
Yeah, well, this is another issue I have with the EU, just as a concept, right? So they just recently signed a really, really sweet deal with Japan, and it's just essentially removed all trade tariffs on all goods, right? And
you know, Japan doesn't do that the other way, right? Like America has been playing this game for them, like 50 years.
Oh, they'll find a way around it. They always do.
No. Japan just keeps the tariffs. They're like, oh, we can import to you for free? Cool. Yeah, you can't have the same. No, go fuck yourself.
Well, okay. So here's the problem with this idea, right? So if you're running a large system of countries, right, that are all producing different goods, part of your trade or your export trade is wrapped up in what you're exporting over to Japan, right? Let's say that, I don't know, 75% of good X is coming from one particular member country, right? And say that member country just all of a sudden decides, you know what, we're gonna leave because this isn't working out for us, right?
Right.
They pay their divorce bill, they get out, whatever, right?
Japan won't care. The EU is the one who's hurt by that, not Japan.
Well, they're going to lose that entire trade deal. There's a good chance that would put it back up on the board for renegotiation, and you're gonna have.
But consider it from Japan's perspective. They're like, okay, now it's one country instead of this conglomerate of countries, and that's pretty much the one we got the shit from. And how much of that one country's economy is actually dependent on sales in Japan, right? It puts Japan in a better negotiating place, so it would be to their benefit. And it only hurt the EU because that one country would probably get a pretty sweet deal.
Well, exactly, but that's the problem with this idea, right? It all runs off of the.
That's why they want to get rid of Article 50, so they can't leave.
Yeah.
And that's why they want to raise the military, so they really can't leave.
Yeah.
You're going where? Well, here's a couple divisions of tanks. Would you care to rethink your position?
Well, exactly, and that's the thing is that this is either the weakness or the strength of the EU, and it all depends on whether they can keep people in or not.
They can't.
You know, right now they can't.
But literally, if France leaves, right, at any point in time, if France leaves, the whole system's done.
Yeah.
That's it.
It would be unsustainable at that point.
Well,
so
you're talking those three countries made up like 70-something% of the budget. One of them's already gone. So if the other one goes, Germany cannot sustain 70% of the budget, which means all the benefits and shit that they're giving to these other countries, they either have to completely go away, or Germany's going to have to start demanding that they foot more of the bill, which also isn't going to happen.
Which just means like that. It'd be really funny if that happens in Germany, sitting there borrowing from all the extra X-Men.
like we've been doing with China.
Exactly. Oh god. I mean, it's just a stupid idea. Like the whole thing from top to bottom, and Europeans are proud of it. Just
You are
let go.
roboting hardcore.
Oh no. Oh no.
That shitty Mexican internet you're on. Anyways, we were talking about education. We got way off track.
Oh yeah.
Was a topic for another time, Mycroft?
Well, it's like whatever. You can clip it down.
the evil goddamn commies taking over Europe. So I'm saying, like, that's what the whole EU thing. It's weird. There's like communism all up in it. You know, they're talking about bringing it back, and it's not hugely popular, but socialism by and large is. So might be seeing a revolution or two popping off in Europe. And it's really interesting because I have no idea how the EU would play with that. Like, it might depend on the country, or they might be the straw that breaks the camel's back on that EU military vote. Right, that might be what prompts that. As the U.S. typically, internal revolutions, we tend to not get involved unless we have to. Like, we literally had military bases in countries where fucking revolutions started popping off, and we're kind of like, well, we'll see who's winning. We'll decide. Like, how do you feel about America, rebels? Oh, you're indifferent to us? Well, we have a base here. If you win, are we going to have to leave? And they're like, no, you can stay. Like, cool, we'll stay out then. Because it doesn't matter to us. Whoever wins, we get to stay, so we're cool.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's the same country, it's the same people. It's cool. Hey, they have their grievances. Who are we to get in the middle of what they have going on? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Invasions tends to be where we get all up in a tiffy. Except for like the 1940s. Apparently, we were asleep at the wheel for a while. We're like, oh, look at that. Countries are being invaded on damn near every continent. That's cool. Like that was... Oh. Anyways, yeah, so... I kind of half want a revolution to happen like now. Like, to start up in the next year or two in one of the European countries. So I'm really curious as to how the EU would handle that from a member. And I thought Greece for sure was going to be the one a couple years ago. If you remember, they were out there throwing a hissy in the street about their bankruptcy.
Oh yeah. I mean,
didn't they have like a 4-day work week and you retire at like 35? Like, I don't know why I don't know why your social systems collapsed there, buddies. I don't know. What a conundrum.
They snuck Greece into the EU in the first place. Yeah. It really had no place being there. So, I think they did it.
It's like the Democrats with the fucking Mexicans. They're like, where the fuck do these 30 million people come from who are all on welfare? And they're like, oh, we don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a huge mess.
Yeah. But I thought for sure it was going to be a full-on revolution, and it didn't happen because, Germany bailed them out?
Yep. Just throwing money at it. That's what they do.
Hey, it solves problems. What can you do? All right. I think that's a good place to end it. Yeah. So, getting back to the topic for anyone who was listening, our higher education system is fucked up. And if you're going to college, you need to figure out what it is you're going to college for before you go to college. You need to figure out how much it's going to cost and what the earning potential is, and determine if that actually makes sense as something to do. There we go. That was the gist of it. You got anything to add to that?
Yeah. If you go to college or university, have a general idea of what the fuck you're there for, and how much people are going to pay you when you get out. It really should. Yeah, well, it should really just be that simple. I mean, what else do you need to say about it?
Well, knowing how much it costs, right? It's like if you're going to go to like a school that's like a private university, and also I would take into consideration the quality of the education there. Look at like, because each school actually does have statistics of employability, like, and sometimes it's based on degree, sometimes it's if they got like really shitty degree paths for people to take. They'll do it just on like overall students to try to mask how bad some of the degree prospects are. But you should be able to find information onto what the employability is, and don't go like to the school and ask them about it, because obviously they're trying to sell you on going to their school. They're going to give you inflated numbers. They're like, oh, like 80% of students graduate from this college have a job within 6 months or 90 days or something like that. And it's like 60. That's not a very, very good. 60 is not very good, right? Like you got a pretty good chance of not being employed at 60%.
Yeah.
So like knowing like what the hireability is, knowing what the cost is going to be, what the job prospects are, those are very important things. And so obviously the first thing you need to do is figure out what you're going to college for, because you can't figure out the other three if you don't know that. So don't just start going to college and then decide you're going to figure it out, because you're just throwing money down the drain that you're going to have to pay back later. And comparing colleges, because some colleges have better employability rates for the same degree at about the same cost, simply because they're doing a better job at educating you, and companies realize that, and so they're more likely to hire somebody with a degree from there because they know that school is doing a good job. So, and vote Republican.
There you go.
Well, honestly, when it comes to education, I mean, if you find Republicans who are talking about radical reform of the education system, that's the guy you should put into office. Because even if he's got a bad idea, it's still going to be better than what we have now.
Right.
Yeah.
I can agree with that.
All right. And that is it.